Okay, we'll call to order the April 11th, 2019 Planning Commission meeting. If you would call the roll, please.
Thank you. Vice Chair Jordan?
Here.
Commissioner Campanella?
Here.
Commissioner Higgins?
Here.
Commissioner Lodge?
Here.
Commissioner Schwartz?
Here.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Thompson are absent.
Thank you. Preliminary matters for staff. Continuances, withdrawals, postponements, or addition of ex-agenda items.
Chair Jordan, we have none.
Okay. And Mr. Campanella, you have something to put on ex-agenda.
Yes, if I can, I'd like to see if the Planning Commission would like to add to a future agenda item looking at the adaptive management report that we only had for a short time to visit during the last session, and there were only 4 of us here at the time. So perhaps if the Planning Commission would like, we could ask staff to reschedule a public meeting to go over it. There's a lot of information there to implement our housing policies, and I think it would be good to spend a little more time on it, along with having the full commission here.
Do you have a preference to that? Does that sound reasonable to you, Mr. Busk?
If directed by Planning Commission, we can add that, absolutely.
It's like one of those that meets that grade. Okay. So everybody just, I think we just nod of heads would be fine, right? We don't need to do a motion or anything, do we?
I'll make the motion if necessary.
Okay. Second. Okay. Any comments from anybody? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
So at some future date, that would be great. I think that'll be really interesting. And then any announcements and appeals? Mr. Busk.
We have no announcements
Okay.
Excuse me, no announcements or appeals.
And then the only public...
Mr. Chair, might it be beneficial for Mr. Busk to give a readout of the 35 North Calle Cesar Chavez appeal from Tuesday at City Council, where I represented the Planning Commission?
Sure. Or you, whichever one would like. Okay.
Thank you. Yes, on Tuesday, the City Council heard the appeal of 35 North Calle Cesar Chavez, which was a conditional use permit request to operate a lumber yard in the OM1 zone. And the City Council voted 6-1 to deny the appeal and uphold the Planning Commission's approval of the CUP. And staff will be returning to the Council with decision and findings. Thank you.
Very good. Okay. And then the only public comment slips I have so far for the item on the agenda today, Diana Road. And Ms. Metzger, are you just general public comment? Okay, so I have one for you. Please step up.
Thank you very much, Jessica Metzger, for the record. And I'm here to announce that we are holding our first public workshop on the AUD amendments that are next to come that we've been working on. And the flyer is up on the screen for those in the public not here to see as well. So it is going to be on April 24th at the Faulkner Gallery at 5:30. And we're kind of making the rounds to all of the boards and commissions to make sure that the general public hears this through public comment, as well as leaving additional flyers. So if any of the commissioners would like to take additional ones home and distribute them to other groups, they're in the back of the room by the public comment slips. And we're really excited to consider the new changes to the average unit size density incentive program in regards to parking and the densities and the boundaries. So thank you very much.
Could you ad-lib maybe 30 more seconds on what those are?
I'm sorry?
And on a little more detail on the parking I've seen some other information that actually lists them out a little more.
Yeah, so, and if you go to the website, this is just a very general flyer, but everything is up there. But we're looking at in lieu fees for parking. So instead of having parking on site, paying a fee that would go to a fund to further create that downtown living room feel that we're looking for. Also unbundling of parking, so possibly allowing residential parking in some of our parking garages and lots, as well as looking at additional parking standards outside of the central business district that might be an increase. We're looking to the public to kind of get their feel for these things, so none of these are final by any means. And then for the densities, you all are very aware just from previous hearings that we're looking at moving the priority housing overlay to what we refer to as the donut, which is basically the downtown State Street area, to further incentivize developers to come to that area, as well as going to the public and seeing what's been working with the boundaries of the AUD program and what might not have been. So that'll all be on the table to get discussion from the public at that moment.
Perfect. I think Ms. Schwartz has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Smets, I'm wondering if you might consider revising this flyer and also the city website to specifically enumerate the aspects of policy revision or policy amendment consideration that will be appropriate for the public and for the public to be prepared to engage in with staff and others on the 24th, so that we set expectations correctly and of benefit to the public, as opposed to what they might want to discuss or might just imagine is within the scope of this forum.
Yes, we
so
can
I
take
just
that.
made a list of what you've just enumerated, and if this is the list, I think it is very important to actually bullet point the list on a flyer and on our website.
We can take that into consideration on adding it to the website, but the flyer has already been put out to many public
Okay.
groups in the city, so it would be inappropriate to change it at this point.
So-
But the website is directed from this flyer, so
Okay, and so for those just watching today, could you just verbally direct us as to where on the city website this information
yes. So if you go
exists?
to the city website and then type in AUD_amendments, that'll take you to the page.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mr. Campanella.
Okay, thank you. It was, so you can go right to the page if you go amendments, to the amendments, because I know you had to go through a couple of screens if you went directly to the AUD, so you've more simplified it to go directly.
Yes, Commissioner, so if you just type in AUD, it takes you to the main page that shows the existing projects. But if you type in _amendments, it takes you directly to this page.
Okay, and then on that page, the type of items that you spoke about as examples of what's going to be discussed, people would be able to see that ahead of
Yes.
time. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Lodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just thought it would be nice if Ms. Metzger would explain what her role is in all of this.
Oh, yes.
You gave your name, but nothing else.
I am project planner for the AUD program amendments and have been working on that since I started back in August. So we're 9 months in, and we're just really happy to get to this part of the amendments to work on.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
We'll see you there. That will close public comment for items not on the agenda, and we'll move on to item A, the annual allocation of unused or expired non-residential small addition square footage. Staff has asked if the commission would just like to go to questions and discussion, or and waive the staff report, or if you'd like to hear the staff report. Go ahead.
Point of clarification, if I could, Mr. Chair, in what you've just discussed, does that mean, or what you've outlined, does that mean no questions or discussion on the staff report, or just a waive of the reading itself?
Of the presentation. So you could still ask your questions as you have the presentation in front of you and what's in the staff report. I just know Mr. Nares has a presentation to go through in slides, and if you don't think that needed, I would entertain a motion, and if nobody's interested in that, we'll go through the presentation.
I'll make a motion to waive the staff report.
Second.
Okay. Sound good? So all in favor? Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on. Mr. Campanella.
Yes, I requested perhaps a look at the boundaries of the downtown area as it's described, and I presume we could still ask that to come up. That was a part of the
Ask anything you want.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Okay. So it's then to the commission for questions and discussion. Ms. Lodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For years now, there's been excess in the small additions category, and which I think the Planning Commission has consistently rolled over, not back into there, because there clearly isn't a need for the full amount that has been allocated for this category. And so it seems to me that the most sensible thing to do is to do as we've done in the past, and once again, roll it over into the community benefit category, because we never know what's going to be coming up there. It's an amount that just keeps gradually going down. There is a project coming that's before the HLC right now, which is asking for to use some of this square footage. It's on Anapamu but it's in the middle of the block, and it's for mental health, capital A, affordable units. And so there will be some more demand for this square footage coming forward.
Ms. Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To staff, I think starting on page 3 of the staff report, there are only 4 pages of the staff report, so there's not too much here. Could you just confirm, as a follow-on to Commissioner Lodge's comment that she just made, that the project in question that will be coming to us, community benefit, categorized as 115 West Anapamu Community Benefit Project? I just wanted to see if that is confirmed on our list, that if that's the one that Commissioner Lodge just mentioned, I believe, because it's now agendized for Planning Commission, 115 West Anapamu. Is that community benefit? Community priority, I guess we'd have to call it.
Chair Jordan, Commissioner Schwartz, that is a project that has not been allocated square footage for community benefit yet. It's
Under consideration.
It's under consideration.
Okay,
I
very
believe
good.
it will be, yes.
Okay. So it looks like, as we've discussed in past years and again today, we have 3 categories. We have community priority project, we have economic development project, and we have new vehicle sales project. When I go to page 4 of our staff report and I look at this chart, I see that between the years 2013 and 2018, we have in the community priority category 1, 2, 3, that's the Museum of Art, Direct Relief, new headquarters, and Contemporary Art Museum. We also had 3 new vehicle sales, Tesla Motors, Santa Barbara Auto Group, and it just says dealership, that's on Hitchcock Way. So I'm wanting to better understand the process from a staff perspective as to how, if at all, we encourage, as applicants come to the city and discuss their interests, especially very early on in their development interest discussion, whether or not staff both explores kind of responsively or reactively, as well as proactively explores with any applicants or potential applicants opportunities for an allocation of the unused expired small addition floor area, specifically in the category of community priority and economic development. What we don't see, I just want to highlight for our discussion, what we don't see in the years 2013 to 2018, again on page 4 in the staff report, are any projects related to economic development. We have all this discussion about revitalizing the downtown core, and there are no projects within a 5-year period, 2013 to 2018, that fall in the category of economic development. So whether it's Mr. Gullett or Mr. Nares, or even Mr. Busk, anybody can comment on that, would appreciate it.
Chair Jordan and Commissioner Schwartz, when staff meets with applicants, we certainly do let them know about the community benefit category and let them know if we believe that they might qualify for one of those categories. So yes, it's something that is discussed early on in the process.
Do you want us to do, Mr. Chair, would you like us to wrap comments in now, or we want me to?
Whatever you like.
Okay.
Excuse me, Chair Jordan. Before we get to comments, could you just formally open public comment?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I'll wait for comments then.
Okay.
And I think those are my questions for now. Thank you.
Mr. Campanella.
Thank you, Chair Jordan. Can we get a slide of the downtown area as defined in our staff report? Okay. So this would be the area that would allow small additions in addition to the minor additions citywide? Is that correct?
Correct.
And any commercial property, say Upper State Street, that's outside of that downtown area would only be allowed to add a minor addition, and that's on a case-by-case basis. It's not coming from any allocation. It's allowed, let's say, under our rules. That extra 1,000 square feet that somebody can apply for.
Chair Jordan, Commissioner Campanella, yes, that is correct. It's allowed per parcel, per lot.
Okay. Let's see. And then I asked the question to staff, but it may be informative. If somebody is merging lots for development, let's say the downtown area, they would be allowed to have 2,000 square feet and 1,000 square feet for a total of 3 of both small and minor for each one of the lots that are being merged. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And I put up a slide right here. Number 2 on the slide is actually one of those cases. 302 West Montecito was 2 lots merging. As you can see, there's 4,000 square feet that was allocated in small additions, and also 2,000 for minor additions for that parcel.
Okay. The police station, wherever it finds a location, would that square footage be community benefit? And if it is or is not, do we have it assigned or figured in our numbers?
Commissioner Campanella, there is another category that can have square footage called government property. So that's where it would come from, I believe.
Okay, so that goes on its own. All right. And I think lastly, I asked this question, and I got an answer from staff, but maybe it's of interest to the rest of the commissioners. 401 and 409 East Haley, they had a small addition that was withdrawn, and we know they have some commercial property in it. So just to explain what was withdrawn.
The case wasn't withdrawn. The square footage that was allocated for small addition was withdrawn. And they are still, I believe, going to have an 805 square foot non-residential addition to that site.
Okay, good. I just want to clarify, they weren't removing the commercial component of their project. They just didn't need the square footage that they thought they might.
Right, they reduced it. They didn't need the small additions.
Okay, thank you.
More questions? Okay.
The other category that you mentioned in response to Commissioner Campanella pertaining to the new police headquarters and government, can you just expound upon that a bit? Since I don't see that category referenced in the staff report or a subcategory.
Commissioner Swords will look it up in our ordinance to get the correct language about it.
I'm sorry, could you speak into the microphone a little bit more?
It's in the ordinance, and we're looking it up right now.
You're looking it up now?
Yeah. Yes.
You mean as to where it would fall within the categories, for example, starting on page 3 that are described?
Yes.
Chair Jordan and Commissioner Schwartz, it's from a different category. So it's not a community benefit allocation. It's a separate category that is not part of the overall 1.3, I believe it's 1.3 million square feet. So it's a completely separate category, and it doesn't require allocation.
It's a government use,
No.
so it...
Yeah, okay. I wanted to understand how, and just to jog my memory, how it constitutes a standalone, in a sense. I'll just use a generic description, a standalone category but still, there are square footage allocations. No, Mr. Gullett, can you just come to the microphone just so I can hear your... Again, so I can just, close out on what the line of inquiry Commissioner Campanella had begun.
Chair Jordan, Commissioner Schwartz, government buildings are specifically excluded from the non-residential growth management limitation on floor area. So that floor area there's no cap on it.
So how do we, and I don't mean staff tracks this somehow, but how then is it factored into overall non-residential square footage allocation, and how does that tie to our general plan policies around managing growth, prioritizing certain types of growth, and allocation of square footage over others, residential over non-residential, that sort of thing? Do you have any thoughts for me on that?
I don't recall the non-residential growth assumptions for government buildings. I don't think substantial increases in city government buildings were anticipated before 2030. But I don't even know if the police station was foreseen back in 2011 when we did the general plan. So that's something I can look into and get back to you.
Would you please, because and Ms. Lodge and I are echoing each other with this one thought. So when the Planning Commission, and I will wrap up, Mr. Chair, so we can proceed to the next step here. The Planning Commission, as you might recall, Mr. Gullett, had a tour of the police headquarters in 2011. We had extensive discussion about funding a brand new police headquarters, whether it was at that property or elsewhere. So are you saying maybe it was just the timing of not being able to fold it into the general plan? It kind of was starting to come on the heels of wrapping up the general plan. Is that your suggestion?
I'll look into it and get back to the commission on what was assumed for government floor area.
Yeah, I'd like,
expansion.
thank you, Mr. Chair, for your indulgence. I would like to see a list of all government-related projects, I guess we'll call it civic-related projects that are outside of this consideration and the square footage associated with them, and either if they've come online and we have allocated that, or it's to be considered like we're doing now in building a brand new police headquarters somewhere else. Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Yep, thanks.
Ms. Lodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A quick comment. The government buildings are not related. They don't create growth. They're providing services for the people that are here. Now, more people means need for more services and more space, but they are not part of creating the demand. And besides, if a new police station, when a new police station is built, there will be the property that they are leaving, which will no longer be in government use. So it will be more square footage, but I really don't see it being an issue here. Thank you.
Mr. Campanella.
Thank you. In the future, when the police headquarters would relocate, the existing property and existing structure would still be considered government buildings. Would it retain that category if it were redeveloped, or is that really up to the city based upon state law relative what you can do with government property?
Chair Jordan, Commissioner Campanella, I haven't contemplated this. It's a good question. I think the question is there transferable development rights that would come from demolishing the police building? That again is something I'll look into and get back to the commission on.
Okay, thank you.
So I just had one question. I was just curious. I don't know why I've never asked this before in a decade, but when an applicant walks in and makes a case for a community benefit project, does staff initially make that determination on whether it qualifies and they should move forward? And does staff have to be in agreement before it moves forward?
Chair Jordan, staff will let the applicant know our recommendation, but we don't make the decision. We would take it to City Council with a staff recommendation, and Council ultimately makes that
I think it actually
determination.
sometimes stops here for a recommendation too, doesn't it? Part of
No,
the- no?
that is
Okay.
not part of the process.
All right.
There used to be a two-step process.
Okay.
And so sometimes the Planning Commission would see it in between it being initiated and the final decision. But when we amended the growth management ordinance, we made it a one-time application to the City Council.
So depending upon the applicant's belief, they can continue on without a staff recommendation, right?
That is correct.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so I will open public comment, but I don't see anybody has turned in a slip for this item, and nobody's jumping up, so I will close public comment, and we can go to discussion and a determination. Ms. Lodge,
Well, I would like to make a motion, Mr. Chair,
fire away.
that the Planning Commission roll over the small addition square footage, the excess, to the community benefit category.
No second? No. Okay. Further discussion. Ms. Schwartz.
Gee, I was hoping that one of my other colleagues would go before me for discussion. I can see they're looking at me to go next. All right. So here's some thoughts I have. I'm not sure whether this just sort of is added to the motion, not in opposition to a motion. I'm trying to find a way. I'm looking at process, and I'm interested in, as staff can probably, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Vaughn. I'm looking for a process by which we can be more proactive. This is not going to surprise staff because I talk about this on the housing policy front as well. A process by which we could be more proactive in educating the community, in encouraging the community, property owners, investors, developers, redevelopers, to bring projects forward that fall within, in my mind, 2 of the 3 community benefit categories. I've enumerated them. They're on page 3 of our staff report. Community priority projects and economic development projects. Quite frankly, and no offense to vehicle sales entrepreneurs, but I'm less concerned and less interested in furthering projects in that category than I am community priority and economic development. I don't know how to go about this. Last Thursday, the Planning Commission with staff had a discussion about Planning Division workload, work priorities, and so I don't know where this would fit in. I can certainly discuss this with staff offline if you prefer. But again, to recap, Mr. Chair, when I look at page 4 of our staff report, the last 5 years, yes, I'm in favor of community priority projects. I'm less enthusiastic about 50% of the projects in these 5 years being related to automobiles, as opposed to economic development. We're spending all this time and resource on our economic development issues, especially in the greater downtown, and yet, for a variety of reasons, not on the city necessarily, we don't see that projects have come forward that warrant being placed in this category and receiving allocation of small addition square footage. So I'm not expecting staff really to comment on that today. I really just want to express that, Mr. Chair, and get it into the record. And perhaps I will be brainstorming this offline with one of my Planning Commission colleagues or when Chair Wiscombe returns from vacation. But to me, this warrants further dialogue inside the city and I think some additional, more proactive efforts to help the community understand what's available to them and then to facilitate or promote, yes, let me use the word promote, and also encourage more projects in these other categories rather than vehicle sales to come forward. Thank you.
So I'm confused for a second because I thought the motion would have moved that along, and that would have been a great discussion
Well,
comment as
I
part of the
would-
motion, but it died for lack of a second.
I understand. You know, I would really like to hear from Commissioners Higgins and Campanella before I decide one way or the other. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Campanella.
Okay, just, sorry, we didn't have this reading of the staff report, the presentation, but if the small addition floor area were the approach, there would be the unallocated and withdrawn of about 15,300 square feet, plus the 2019 allocation of 20,000 square feet. There would be a total of, would there be a total of 35,000 square feet that would be available during the year 2019 for these small additions?
Commissioner Campanella, are you looking at a particular portion of our
I'm
staff
sorry, I'm looking
report
at-
or one of the slides?
Well, I'm looking at page 2. There was square footage that was either unallocated out of the 20,000, which is 13,216, and then there was another 2,100 that was withdrawn, which means there was like 15,000 that would have been available to somebody during the year 2018. So is one option to roll that over to 2019 and add 20,000 square feet of the next year's allocation to that? Is that correct?
Yes.
So I was looking really at the balances of 280,000 remaining at the end of 2018 in the small addition category and 473 in the community benefit. And is it, one approach is to not reduce one too much or keep them more equivalent? I don't know. You know, I don't know really what's coming up next. But I understand Commissioner Schwartz' designation of looking at economic development as in whole, but also adding small addition floor area to commercial properties is also maybe not just adding the square footage, but also a redevelopment of a particular property for commercial use that may be to a better use that would be economic development, let's say, in itself. So what I'm doing is trying to balance, do I want the 473 to go up and the 280 to go down, or do I want to leave the 280 alone and allow it to roll over so there's more of a relationship that's closer? And I guess that's what I'm trying to decide right now.
So my comment on that, if I'd been sitting one chair to the left, I would have seconded that motion for the reason that I see the community benefit category as the greatest flexible category that benefits the community. I get exactly what I agree and get exactly what Commissioner Schwartz is saying, but I also firmly believe we'll be sitting somewhere in a year and we will have somebody, either the city or downtown Santa Barbara, will have a economic development position going in the city. The private parcel owners will have something going in the city. It won't be your historical in-the-box thinking. There will be much more going on that's that as housing moves into the inner core, that the commercial services and the ability to put those commercial services there will have to be looked at in new ways. And to me, the greatest flexibility for deciding that if it needs one-off decisions is that community benefit category. So, Ms. Lodge.
Oh, and Mr. Oh, okay. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Turn your mic on.
I'm a bit puzzled. I'm a bit puzzled by this line of discussion. This category allows more square footage for economic benefit projects. Our problem downtown is that we've got too much retail, too much commercial. And the report that was done for the downtown organization was one of their conclusions. We're operating under 1964 zoning in that regard. When it was anticipated the community could grow to almost twice the population that it has now. And so, frankly, I don't see this as an issue. There's plenty of commercial square footage available. The problem is trying to get it, what we have, getting it be used.
Ms. Schwartz.
Well, maybe I need to ask staff a question here. So let's go to the economic development section on page 3 of the staff report. There are 4 subcategories in this section. So there are 4 components, A, B, C, and D, for economic development. So I have a question for staff. Let's go to D. Support a small and local business in Santa Barbara, in the Santa Barbara community, which is being started, maintained, relocate, redeveloped, or expanded. So maybe I need to further understand how our existing allocation is either sufficient or deficient in even furthering that subcategory D, in response to Commissioner Lodge's comment and position on this.
Chair Jordan and Commissioner Schwartz, I think that's difficult to answer because the additions are parcel-based. So each parcel gets a certain allocation, and most of our parcels are developed, so they already have some commercial square footage, and we're talking about minor additions to that.
Okay.
We use these commercial allocations most often if it's a vacant, the vacant parcels get their own allocation, but perhaps a parcel that only has a residential development and wants to redevelop with commercial. But that's part of the reason why we don't see a lot of them, is because the parcels are already developed with commercial square footage. So it'd only be if they're looking to go above and beyond, what they have plus their 3,000 square feet of minor and small addition allocation.
How about item C, provide products or services which are currently not available or are in limited supply, either locally or regionally? How does that play out in terms of the question I posed to you?
Commissioner Schwartz, I think it's a similar answer.
Okay.
And I think for the downtown area, because it is so developed, we don't see this very often. This type of business could go into an existing building. It would only be something, perhaps like direct relief that needed a space significantly larger than anything that we already had. And they needed to build a brand new building that was well in excess of the square footage that they could be allocated otherwise.
Although direct relief was not in this category, it was community priority. So I'm following on Commissioner Lodge's comments and her position, and that's why I was specifically asking for some thoughts from you on the economic development.
Yeah.
But I think that's it for now. I know we want to move this item along, but not to put him on the spot, but I am going to put him on the spot. I would like to hear from my colleague, Commissioner Higgins, please.
Mr. Higgins.
Thank you. So it just sounds like a round peg in a square hole, what you're getting at with I don't mean your idea, but the framework we have here just doesn't allow for us to do what we want to do or what you're articulating, which is excellent. And I think we ought to have a place for those reserves, but we just don't have that in our framework at this time. So, I guess I'd probably go back to supporting the original motion as it was made because, I guess perfection is the enemy of good enough. So those things that are economic development are still in that community benefit category, and that's close enough to what you were saying. Does that work?
So, Mr. Chair, I'll support the motion. I'm always looking for process improvement, as you know, knowing me for the years you have, and I think that's the beauty of adaptive management. We have this tool, and if we don't use the tool, then it's on us that we don't spend our time and our resources on continuous improvement for process improvement. So as staff has come to know me, this is sort of an iterative, ongoing perspective that I have and something I spend a fair amount of time considering. And so I appreciate the conversation today and the answers today. And I think with that, I'll be willing to support the motion. Thank you.
Do I need to make it again?
Ms. Lodge.
I move the Planning Commission roll over the small additions category into the community benefit category.
I'll second that. Any discussion?
I'd like to make just another comment. As I understand the Amazon project where Saks used to be, The city is trying to get it to include some retail, but otherwise, that's retail. It's all going away. It was 2 whole floors of it. So I think there's plenty of retail available.
Any other discussion? Okay, so motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. That carries unanimously. We'll move on to our next item for the project located at 1202 Diana Road. We'll take a breath while you all get situated. Ms. Bedard, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair Jordan. Commissioners, good afternoon. My name is Michelle Bedard, Assistant. Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners, Chair Jordan and Commissioners. My name is Michelle Bedard. I'm Assistant Planner with the City Planning Division, and I will be presenting the application before you today at 1202 Diana Road for the requested tentative subdivision map. And I'll put that in PowerPoint. So a vicinity map of the proposed project site identified within the general east side neighborhood with APS above, Alameda Padre Serra located above, and Milpa Street below. A zoomed in aerial of the neighborhood showing the project site highlighted in the screen color with Diana Road on this side, which turns into Diana Lane, and East Coda Street along this side of the parcel. You'll see the existing parcels, this flag-shaped lot. It's a 1.06 acre lot in the RS6 residential zone. This is just showing you the adjacent residential zones within the neighborhood. You'll notice it's primarily surrounded by single residential zones with the exception of the parcels fronting East Coda Street that are zoned R2. Again, the parcel size, the residential zone, the existing parcels over an acre, and the minimum size, lot size for the area is 6,000 square feet. So the site is developed with an existing residence, an adobe residence that was constructed in 1921, and it has, the existing adobe has additions post-1921 and some existing detached accessory buildings. The proposed project before you today is for the tentative subdivision map, subdividing the 1.06 acre parcel into 4 lots with the respective lot sizes here. Lot sizes range from 9,004 square feet to 15,505 square feet, with the existing adobe on proposed lot 3. So this is just a blow up here of the site showing the existing footprint of the existing development. The proposal includes the demolition of the areas identified in red. The areas identified attached to the rear of the adobe are the post-1921 additions, and an accessory building and another detached accessory building as a 2-car garage here. The proposal involves the restoration of the existing 1921 adobe to remain. This is the front elevation, and then this is showing just the proposed footprint and the new 2-car garage attached at the rear of the existing adobe in the location of the footprint to be demolished. The proposal includes construction of 3 new residential units on on 3 of the 4 proposed lots. The unit size range from 2161 to 2694 square feet, and that includes an average 2-car, 400 square foot garage. The proposal also includes a new driveway from East Coda Street. It's just a Google Street views shown here with the adjacent condos to the south at 1133 East Coda Street and the location of the proposed new driveway where the vegetation is. And the proposed new driveway will alter a portion of the existing driveway that the existing condos were accessed through a reciprocal access agreement that was granted on the benefit of the condos in 2003. So here's a schematic of the proposed parcel. I turned it to the right, so north is kind of in that lower direction, 2 northern parcels, northern property lines. The existing adobe here at the bottom left. And so this is proposed lot 3. Proposed lot 1 here with a proposed new single-family dwelling with the access to Coda Street. Proposed lot 2 at the rear of lot 1, lot 3 again, and proposed lot 4 here at the lower portion, which has the access to Diana Road. So the proposal before you today involves the discretionary applications requested for a tentative subdivision map, requesting the subdivision of an existing 1.06 acre parcel into 4 parcels, a public street waiver. The public street waivers, to allow a subdivision to have the proposed parcels not to front a public street. And that's why we're before you today, is the public street waiver requires Planning Commission approval. The proposal has also requested 4 street frontage modifications to allow the proposed lots to not meet the minimum required 60 feet of street frontage required by the zoning ordinance. So for zoning ordinance consistency here, just a snapshot from this staff report. The proposed project, with the exception of the public street waiver and the street frontage modifications, is consistent with zoning. It meets the required minimum setbacks, building height, parking, lot size, open yard. The modifications, the street frontage modification involves the fact that the existing parcel is a flag lot. The existing parcel does not meet the minimum 60 feet of public street frontage. So the ordinance requires that newly created lots must have a minimum 60 feet of public street frontage. As the existing parcel has 15 feet of public street frontage along Diana Road where the existing driveway is, and 30 feet along East Coda Street, which is currently unimproved, and where the proposed new driveway is. Unimproved with the exception of the portion that's improved for the adjacent condos. So again, the street frontage requirement is 60 feet for each lot. The proposed lot 1 will maintain the existing access along Coda Street, which will be improved and will be serve the primary driveway, so that will have 30 feet of street frontage. Lot 2 and 3 are proposed to be interior lots with 0 street frontage, and lot 4 is proposed to maintain the existing 15 feet of street frontage along Diana Road. Public street waiver. The public street waiver, again, as a newly created lot, requires parcels developed that have street frontage along a public street. And in this particular case, it's often for a subdivision of this sort with a flag lot to approve the public street waiver. In this particular case, additionally, the proposed driveway will meet fire and public works requirements, meeting the minimum standards necessary. Staff did not find that it would be a public benefit to provide an existing, or to provide, provide a new public street at this location. And as part of the conditions for a public street waiver, it will include recorded conditions to maintain the private driveway. Environmental review. The subject property did go through several rounds of environmental review and provided various reports as outlined in the staff report. The primary report, and one of the primary reports included a historic site structures report as requested by the Historic Landmarks Commission. In drafting of that report, the existing adobe was designated a structure of merit, and the proposal will include the restoration of the existing adobe. The proposal also, some of the environmental concerns involve the proposed tree removals. They are proposing to remove 5 trees at the site, primarily to serve the new driveway fronting Coda Street. The proposal will include 22 new trees. The proposal was prepared, there was a staff report, a arborist report that concluded that the proposal of 22 new trees will replace the biomass for the existing site, and we will maintain standard construction conditions to protect the existing and proposed new trees. Design review. The site went through design review by both the Single Family Design Review Board and Historic Landmarks Commission. Historic Landmarks Commission, first review on January 10th, 2018. At that hearing, they requested the Historic Site Structures Report be prepared. April 18th, you'll see the Commission did not agree with the conclusions of the Historic Structures Report. In the interim, they revised the report on May 2nd. They approved the Phase 1 of the Historic Structures Report. May 16th, the Historic Landmarks Commission designated the existing adobe a structure of merit. And on July 11th, they approved the Phase 2 of the Historic Structures Report and provided favorable comments of the project. The Single Family Design Board is also involved in the project and will review and has purview over the subdivision and the proposed construction of the three new residents. The first review on January 22nd, they encouraged the applicant to do an extensive study of the neighborhood for architectural style and size, bulk and scale. The applicants returned on May 14th with showing a neighborhood study and architectural design considerations, and the board appreciated the reduction of the revised project, including revised plate heights, reduced plate heights, FARs, the floor to lot area ratio, and found the architecture to be compatible with the neighborhood. They returned on May 29th when the project was compatibility analysis criteria was satisfied and the project was continued to the Planning Commission. Policy consistency. The proposed subdivision is complies with consistent with the general plan density at low density residential, maximum 5 dwelling units per acre, which results in a minimum 8,712 square feet of lot area. As you saw in the previous slide, the minimum lots areas range from 9,004 to over 15,000 square feet. Consistent with general plan density, and the lots will be low density single family development as they are in the RS6 single residential zone. So a couple land use general plan consistency policies. The land use element, policy LG 14, encourages the projects maintain character and quality of single family zone neighborhoods. The project, as discussed, will be developed with low density single family development. And housing element policy H10 encourages the development of houses on infill sites. So the staff felt this project was a prime example of infill, given that it was an existing 1 acre site within the existing single residential zone neighborhood. The subdivision complies with the Subdivision Map Act. Again, the site is physically suitable for a subdivision and will not cause environmental damage, will not cause public health issues, nor prevent access to public resources or violate water quality requirements. Conclusion, with the approval of the zoning modifications and public street waiver, staff finds that the project is consistent with the city's zoning, the tentative map ordinance, and policies of the general plan. Staff recommendation, the Planning Commission approved the project as proposed, making the findings in the staff report, and approve the permit subject to the conditions of approval. I do want to add one condition that we noted that was not included in the draft conditions of approval that came up at upon discussion with Public Works staff and fire staff, and we are going to include recommendation of adding a standard condition that there shall be no parking in the fire turnaround lane, which is something that would be probably included in the building permit stage, but just a good reminder. And that concludes my presentation. I'm available if you have any questions. We also have Chelsea Swanson, Public Works Transportation, and Nicole Hernandez, Urban City Historian. Thank you.
Very good. So we will have public comment, so if you have some immediate questions that will help during that process too, I'll look for those now. Mr. Higgins.
Thank you. Could you put up slide, I'm not sure which number it is. It shows the elevation, the street view from Coda of the existing access to the existing condos. And just give me some background on when those condos were created and how that access works. So what's happening here is that that's going to be widened.
Commissioner Higgins, yes, correct. Thank you. The driveway that you see there is was developed as part of the condo association in 2003. The existing condos. In 2003, the condos, the current property, the 1202 Diana, parcel owner granted a reciprocal access easement over the property. It's 15 feet wide, 7.5 feet on either side, and so 7.5 feet of that existing driveway is 1202 Diana's property. And so the proposal will be to alter that existing driveway, and where you see the hedges and trees, those will be removed to create a wider driveway that will meet Public Works and transportation requirements.
And so that easement, the driveway there on the left side of the screen with the pavers, that is the applicant's property that he or she granted an easement to those people for access to back in 2003?
Correct.
And how many people use that, or how many units does that driveway serve?
The condo development has 4 condos, and I believe 2 have access to it, and 2 have access along East Coda Street.
And there's no setback. That's not a road, so there's no setback, or how does that work? Because
yeah,
it's
Commissioner,
essentially, if that were a road, it would be within some sort of a side yard setback, right?
Yeah, for instance, if there were to be a public road put in, then it would be a front setback, and all of the parcels fronting that street would have the setback.
So in 2003, though, there was nothing required in terms of a setback off that road because it was a private easement, or because
exactly,
it was a PUD, or what was the mechanism to?
It was just an interior property line, and it was part of the reciprocal access agreement to provide access.
And is there an upper limit on the number of units that something like that can serve without requiring more setback on it's a private driveway now, but it's going to continue to be a private driveway, but serving more units, so picking up more traffic?
There's no maximum number.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Campanella.
Thank you. Question on the Public Works side. Is there anything unusual about getting services to the site to serve these 4 units relative to extensions, topography? Anything unusual?
Chair Jordan, Commissioner Campanella, are you referring to utilities?
Water, any dry and wet utilities.
I'm going to defer that to the applicant. I'm with transportation, so typically engineering and public works reviews all of those requirements, and I know they were thoroughly vetted through the application process. So.
Okay, I'll raise it again. And then a question for our historian, if I can. Thank you. In looking at the report, is this a typical, let me start this way. Was the Adobe, was that on a potential structure of merit list prior to the application being submitted for the subdivision?
Thank you, Chair Jordan, Commissioner Campanella. No, it was not on the potential historic resource list. It came through our demolition review ordinance. When any project comes through that's over 50 years old, it's routed to me to see if there'll be any impacts or if there's a historic resource on site. And Ms. Bedard and I did a site visit and found that the historic adobe was on the site and needed more study. The original proposal did propose to remove a large portion of the adobe, which once analyzed with the historians and the Historic Landmarks Commission, the project proposed to retain all the original adobe portions and incorporate that into the proposal rather than demolishing it. So
Okay.
that's happening.
So this, what we have here with new development going on next to a historical resource that's being modified a bit but still retains the character, is this a fairly typical project? Was it easier or harder for any reason that you would expect normally?
No, I think it was pretty typical. We usually when we have a historic resource, we encourage the restoration of the resource with the compatibility of the new construction. So this became a really good example of how old and new can work together and create a great new living space, incorporating both worlds.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? I just had one easy one. In the Single-Family Design Board minutes at their last meeting, there was a request in the middle of their request that asked staff and the applicant to look some more at the Diana Road exit, the exiting of any or all of the units. Could you tell me, did anything result of that increased scrutiny? It's number 5 on the Single Family Design Board last meeting minutes on some unknown page in the whole packet.
Thank you, Chair Jordan and Commissioners. Yes, that was really brought to that came about by the public that were concerned with the proposed project and the potential for using the private driveway as a public street. And so their request
So more so related to people from cutting through the block rather than the residents?
Kind of that where the proposed driveway is, it would align with the
Okay.
forgetting the street name. What's
It was a straight shot originally.
Yeah, straight
probably.
shot for the.
Which it kind of is, but it kind of jinks a little now, right? Coda to Diana.
Where is it? Yes, so you'll see this street here. So the concern was that they wanted it to be emphasized as a driveway and not a through public street.
And so how is that being how is that being accomplished in the applicant's mind?
Well, I'll defer to the applicant. They have some ideas of how they would decorate the.
Chair Jordan, I spoke with our traffic engineering staff in the event that they do feel like this is becoming a cut through. Just looking at the circulation in the area, we don't see there's a demand for that to be a cut through. It doesn't make a lot of sense for most of the traffic patterns. But if it did, often you'll see private signage at driveways that you could install. They would be allowed to install signage that says private access, not a public street.
Sure,
so that would be one way to handle it.
Sure, I'll hear more from the applicant too then on that.
Okay.
No further questions, and off to the applicant. You're up, Mr. Gorn.
Hi, good afternoon. Do I get more than 2 minutes? It says 2 minutes.
You get pretty much as much time as you want.
I'll keep it really brief because I think Michelle covered most of the important things here. I'm Jarrett Gorin from Vanguard Planning, and let's get my computer on the screen too. That would be awesome. Great. I'm Jarrett Gorin from Vanguard Planning. I represent the applicant, BLH Properties, and we're proposing this basically very straightforward infill subdivision up here on the east side. So I'm going to just cover a couple of areas that Michelle, that staff doesn't usually touch on in their presentations. So I think neighborhood context is pretty important with this project. it got lots of consideration in the design review phase of the project. So I just wanted to walk through it real quick. So this is the project site area. That's our site right there. It's a flag lot with access off Coda Street and Diana Road. And let's just take a quick look on those streets, what's sort of adjacent to our site here. So this is the condos where our driveway is going to come through. And as you go up the street, there's some smaller homes, 1-story, there's some 2-story homes. I couldn't get a good picture of that one because of the hedge. Another small 1-story. Eclectic architecture. These homes are starting to get into sloped lot conditions where they're getting onto more than one level. But just, typical Spanish homes. So then let's take a look at La Quila Lane. This is the cul-de-sac that's right down below us. And so here, this was developed a lot later, I think, than the stuff on Coda Street. So these homes, they started off smaller, but a lot of them have been remodeled and expanded. Some of them really nicely, like this one. It's at the very end of the cul-de-sac. And then these ones here are a lot closer to what was initially there. And then you can see this is our site is up here. These are actually the tops of some story poles that we had in. And then, again, that's one of the more original houses on that street. And then on Diana Road, as you start right at the corner of La Quila and Diana, this is the house. I think the second story is probably an addition there too. That's our, that's our driveway right next to it. Then as you start going up the street, pretty much every house along the street is a multi-level house as viewed from the street, and that's due to the topography. It slopes up pretty significantly to get up to our site from Diana Road. So just as you keep going along the street here, you just see sort of the same thing. So I always like to see how projects fit into the neighborhood with an overlay like this. So I'll take the site away and drop our site plan on there. And so, you can see we're slightly less dense than the neighborhood that surrounds us. And that makes sense. Our lot sizes are, our smallest lot's about 50% bigger than the minimum lot size in the zone district. And then, as staff mentioned, these are R2 lots along here, and I'll talk some about those when I get to the site plan in a second here. So I'll go through the site plan and the architecture. I agree with Ms. Hernandez. It's challenging to develop a site that has any sort of significant resource on it. It could be a biological site. It could be a historic building, in this case, a designated landmark, I guess. And so we have both. We have oak trees and things to work around that we wanted to preserve, and we have this historic resource. So some features of our site plan, just real quick, coming in here, this is the Diana Road side. This is coming in from Coda Street. And this area right here, this is the fire department turnaround that they're talking about. So that's why this is wider right in here. And so basically we come in, we have a driveway that goes up the middle. That's the way you minimize paving in a project like this versus having to, go around the edges or something. So we also have this area at the back corner. That is where we have the steepest topography on the site. It really slopes off towards our neighbor, and there's also some pretty dense vegetation down in there. So we restricted that area per this map so that the city doesn't have to, or our neighbors don't have to worry about somebody coming in and developing in that area later on a project that might not be subject to review at the level of planning commission. It might just be a design review board. I think also it's the relationship of how these houses are set out relative to structures in the neighborhood is also important here. So what you can see is we do come down in these three places to the minimum setback that we're allowed. There are no setback modifications or open yard modifications or anything's needed as part of this project. So we do comply with setbacks on everything. But it worked out pretty well that where these minimum setbacks are, they're always next to something on the other side. Just because of the way these lots back onto our property, our minimum setbacks end up being next to sort of the biggest setbacks on all the properties, especially these ones along Coda Street here. These are some extremely deep lots, and these residential structures are really far from us. Also, we know about a proposed accessory dwelling unit that's going to come in on this site, and that still works along with the whole thing. It is a little bit closer to a structure than what is occurring everywhere else, but it's an accessory use, and it's something that's proposed. So this isn't, it would be them impacting us really instead of the other way around. So let's go through the parcels real quick. And when we get to these lot sizes, this is a flag lot. So portions of the driveway are within this parcel area. So like if you're just looking at this and thinking, wait, 15,000 square feet, well, it's because it includes all of this here. When you subtract this out of it, you still end up with something that has dimensions similar to a 6,000 or 7,000 square foot lot. And that's in these cases of the flag lots. So here's what that individual lot ends up looking like. You can see we've got we're meeting the 1,250 square foot private open yard area on all 4 of these lots. This is the architecture of the house on there. Again, that square footage there includes a 400 square foot 2-car garage. So normally when you're talking about a house, you wouldn't say 2345 for this house. You'd say this was a 1,900 square foot house, like if you were listing it in MLS or something. But the city and we put these square footages on because this is what we use to calculate FARs, and this gives you the true sense of the mass and bulk of the house. So you can see the architecture there. Again, this architecture had to be okay with both the Historic Landmarks Commission and the Single Family Design Board because it has to meet all of the single family design guidelines, and it also has to be sympathetic and compatible with the Adobe that's on here. So I'll just walk you through the rest of the lots really quick. That's parcel 2. Here's how it works. Architectural theme carried along. On this one, I think this is our largest house. And in this case, we've got this really good wedding cake thing that the boards always like to see when you're doing second stories, although it's just not a very big house to begin with. I think our FARs overall in this project range from 38% of maximum up to, I think, 78% of maximum. And generally, you don't have to do any sort of FAR studies at anything under 85%. That's sort of presumed compatible. So this is the Adobe lot. And Michelle covered this a little bit. This is the sort of not very well done addition that was done here. There's some accessory buildings out there. They're all getting demolished, and the end result is that we'll end up with this lot with essentially the original Adobe structure here and then a small 2-car garage that's attached to that. And it's cute. We like how it came out. It's only a 1-bedroom house, but it's a really nice house. It's got some strange exterior features, but I guess they're significant. The roof is actually pretty interesting on this one. And then this will be our last of the new homes that's proposed. And here's how its lot works out. And there's the architecture. So there just hasn't been a whole lot of real crazy controversial issues on this project. I heard one of you ask something about oak trees when we were out on the site visit on Tuesday, so I thought I would just include an exhibit. This is our tree plan. It comes out of our 1/2-inch thick tree study that we did. These are the 5 oak trees that are proposed for removal, and we've got tons of trees on the site, so wherever you do anything, it's going to impact a tree somewhere. And in this case, they're really impacted by the driveway here, and then putting this house here. We just expect that these trees are going to get removed. So we're proposing removal of these 5 trees. Also, down here, we've got these 2 oak trees that we redesigned the driveway. What's going on here? We redesigned the driveway to swerve around the trees. They're still going to be impacted. I have no idea what's going on with this here. maybe city TV can switch us back. Well, my next slide shows you the 22 replacement trees that we're putting in. They're 24-inch box oaks. They're scattered all over the project site. There they are. Those, they make you mitigate with multiple trees for every one because they don't necessarily all make it. But even if just a portion of these make it, we're going to have the trees being replaced on site. Another issue that was important to staff was the biomass in the canopy of the trees. And so one of the critical things in this report was for us to get enough trees coming back that when the trees mature, that they're actually going to exceed the current tree canopy area that we have out there on the site now. So that's my presentation. I think on the question, I think it was Chair Jordan asked about utilities. One of you asked about utility. Campanella. There's nothing unusual about this site. It's actually sort of ideal from a development perspective. Obviously, water can come in from just about anywhere. I believe it's coming in from Coda Street. Usually, drainage and sewer are your problems. And we're up above Diana Road, and we have the ability to get our sewer down into our driveway and then take that straight down to Diana Road. Plenty of fall, no problems with that. And the drainage works that way too. And if there are questions about drainage, I'd rather not cover it up front. If you all have questions about that, I could answer those if something comes up with that. The short answer is we're taking all of our own drainage, channeling it through our driveway to the street, and we're picking up drainage that flows onto our property from other properties and also bringing that around the property. So that's the bullet points of our drainage. And I can answer any questions that you have.
Any quick questions for the applicant before we go to public comment? Nope. All right. You're off the hook for the moment. Then we'll open up public comment and invite you up. First up is Jody Boyman. Hi.
Hi, Chair Jordan and Commissioners. My name is Jody Boyman. I live at 1216 Diana Road. My home is about 10 feet below the lowest grade of the property in question. My retaining wall along the property line near parcel 3 already leans toward my home because it's holding up so much tonnage of earth, and in fact is only about 3 feet away from my bedroom, and in fact about 3 feet away from my bed, this wall that is leaning already. So any earth-moving equipment in that area could imperil my retaining wall, possibly causing it to fail. Parcel 2 and 3 are on top of quite a bit of a hill. If you haven't had a chance to go out there, it's amazing. It kind of goes up. So all of that water drains down towards my home, and it already floods extensively every winter. I respectfully request a special drainage study be done with regards to the impact to my home. It's crucial for all of us that there be story poles for each parcel, not just the single-story pole that is currently erected. It's the only one we could find when we were out there yesterday. Story poles would help show that this project is out of keeping with the architectural size and structure of the homes it looks down upon in this bucolic, historic, and modest neighborhood. Our homes on Diana Road are one story with only parking and storage below. In my case, my garage is partially below grade and thus prone to regular flooding from the 1202 Diana Road property. I was planning to sell my home in about 18 months. I moved there to put my children through school, and my business is operated out of my home. I chose it for its tranquility, its quiet. That will be massively disturbed with the building of 4 homes, and it will prevent me from moving at the time that I need to move. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Lauren Schneider. Hi. And I'll just say I'm not really clocking anybody today, but that was about a good amount of time. Okay?
Perfect. Okay. Thank you, Chair Jordan and Commissioners. I'm Lauren Schneider. I live in 1210 Diana Road. The two-story houses that are on parcel 2 and 3 will dominate the view of my backyard, my bathroom, my second bedroom, and kitchen. I believe that the development violates my privacy, which was one of the features for which we bought this home in this peaceful, historic neighborhood. The scale of the project, I think, puts an unfair burden on the neighborhood, where no home sits on top of the other. And I don't know the impact of water. We've just had to put in a French drain to our garage because of the extensive water of the recent rains. And my home is below a very steeply sloping hill, which is underneath the development. So I don't know how the impact of moving earth or water is going to affect my home. And the construction, which will go on, I imagine, for a fair amount of time, is going to disturb the peace of this neighborhood, and we will not have any compensation for that. So I thank you.
Commissioner
Ms. Schneider,
Higgins has a question for you.
Did you attend any of the design review hearings on this project? There were
Yes.
several of them. Okay.
Yes.
And you were able to articulate these concerns,
Yes.
privacy-wise, with the board? And do you feel they made any changes?
Well, I'm appreciative of the change, both to preserve the historic adobe that's there, and also because it is a one-level home. So that is directly over my home and will be less intrusive than the original two-story plan.
Thank you.
I don't know how the other houses, but I know that parcel number 2 will look into my, parcel number 4 will look into my home as well. None of our homes are dominated by homes above us.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think there's a couple more questions. Stay with us here, Ms. Schneider. So, Commissioner Lodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to get a little clarification
Yes.
exactly where you are. Are you on the upside of the access to Diana? The previous speaker's down the downside, and you're on the next lot up? Is that?
No, I am the lot prior as Diana slopes upward. I'm closer to the driveway that they are proposing off of Diana.
It's right here.
I'm next door to the home that will be directly impacted by that driveway. So
On the downside?
on the downside.
Okay, thank you very
There's
much.
like 3 lots there that sort of are on Diana that range from the driveway to the top side of the project. You're in the middle
I'm
one.
in the middle, yes.
Can you point to
Yes. Yes. So that's it, yes.
Commissioner Schwartz.
Thank you, Ms. Schneider. You mentioned that you think the scale of the proposed development will be an unfair burden, and you specifically mentioned the 2-story being proposed. I'm very familiar with the neighborhood, and we were out there on Tuesday, as you probably know. There's really a mix, as you've experienced, of 1-story, 2-story. So I'm just trying to understand what you think the unfair burden will be when there are many 2-story houses, single-family homes in your neighborhood.
Well, Commissioner Schwartz, I really appreciate from a previous design review that the original proposal was asked to scale down these houses to fit in with this neighborhood, which is an old, as you know, historic neighborhood, and so houses are small, though they are some 2 stories. Mine is a single story. It's just above the garage. But none of our homes have been dominated by any other home. That's what I'm talking about, that these are 2-story homes that are being built directly behind, but over our lots.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Rue Granollis. Oops, I'm messing that up pretty good, aren't I? Come on up, Rick. Sorry about that.
That's all right. No problem.
It's my eyes, not your writing.
No problem. Well, good afternoon, everyone. So I live at 1220 Diana Road, and that is the northeast corner. And if you look at the map, that's the upper corner right there. And if you got a pointer, come down a little bit more right there. Yes, that's us right there. Okay, so we interface with part of the lot there, and we are at one of the lowest points as far as drainage is concerned. And that's, oh, I'm sorry.
There you go.
As far as drainage is concerned, that's one of our big concerns here, because it drops about 15 or so feet from where the current buildings are down to that corner, and we have had a lot of water through that area. Now, I noticed that on a earlier set of plans there was a notation about an existing drainage, and they were referring to my drainage that I have created on that side, and I wanted to clarify that drainage that they're referring to, and I don't know if they're referring to it because they want to say, okay, there's existing drainage here for us, but it's actually something that we had our gardeners put in for our backyard. And it just happens that there is a lot of water flow into it from this property, so from 1202. So we've been dealing with that for a long time. We've had to put sandbags around that part of our house in the winter, especially during the heavier rains, to keep the water from flowing under our house. So that's a problem for us, obviously. And, we also recognize that there are our next door neighbor, Jody, also has some problems from the water flow down that side. And we don't know exactly what is going to be done to, mitigate the amount of water that's going to be flowing, because it is a pretty open area. If you look at the plans, that's one of the more open areas right now. But I understood from what he said that as far as the hardscape is concerned, everything's drained off the lot, I assume. Okay, so that's that one. One other issue is that the lights and noise from vehicles that are going to be driving around in this thing, especially at night, I think could be an issue with a lot of us there along Diana and Coda. And what I'm saying is that, when you've got cars that are driving with their lights on and they stop and they sit there with their lights and they're shining into your bedroom because they just happen to pull up to an area and they don't know or they don't care, but it's shining right into our bedroom because we're on the same level with these people. So I don't know if that's been taken into account. I've brought that up before at some of the previous meetings and they haven't addressed it. So I think they said that this is something I need to talk to you guys about. So there's that, and then I also was hoping to see the story poles made available. There are currently just 2 poles, and that's for the house on lot number 2. It would be good to have all of the poles up so that we can really get an idea of the scale, magnitude of this thing. There are also questions about the trees that are near our property. One of them has been tagged for removal, I've noticed, and it's like right on the property line or near the property line. And it would be really nice to at least leave it there and give us some privacy, because I'm looking at those story poles and I can see these people are going to be looking right into our jacuzzi. So that's one. And then another is the eucalyptus trees there. And this is kind of I understand something I need to take up maybe with them, but I'd like to talk to them about the eucalyptus trees because they haven't really addressed those at all. There's a large eucalyptus tree on the southeast corner of our lot. So, I think, we had a meeting the other night with our neighbors, and, one of the things that we decided was that we'd really like for the commissioners to come out and see what it looks like from our properties, from our backyards. I know you were out there and you walked the property, but we'd invite you to come out and take a look from our properties to see what it looks like from our perspective as well. And lastly is just the increased traffic flow in the area. I think that's going to be a problem as well. So that's all.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, may I ask the gentleman a question?
Go ahead.
Could you just recap, so I'm clear, how many trees on the property you're referring to and what types of trees you're asking be retained or not removed for privacy screening?
Yeah, there's just one tree.
Okay.
One tree, and it's, I'm not sure what type it is. I'm sorry?
The species, or?
I don't know what it is.
I want to identify it. If we engage with the applicant, I'd like to refer to that, but I wouldn't know how to do that otherwise.
It's pretty much, if you look over into our yard, you'll see a jacuzzi sitting there. And it's like almost right there next to that jacuzzi. It's about, I'd say, 15, 20 feet tall.
Okay.
It's not a very
I'll
large
ask
tree.
Perhaps the applicant's familiar with which tree you're referring to. Okay, thank you very much.
That answers your question?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Casey Hart.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Hi.
I'm Casey Hart. I live at 1204 Diana Road. Most of my issues, they switched the plans from the original plans, which I never saw the new plans. And now the house on Lot 4 is right behind my house. So I'm wondering what the setbacks are. And also, after watching all the trucks and Marburg go up and down the easement next to my house, the other day one went up there and said he couldn't go through. He had to go around Frucota. So I don't see how all these cars and all these people are going to go up and down, even if it's just two houses on the one driveway, as well as the other one, even though it's widened. But my main problem is I don't want a house peering into my backyard. I knew it was going to be there when I bought the house 40 years ago. I've already planted trees on the lot line, knowing that's going to happen. There was no house there on the previous plan, and now there's a house looking right into my house, and it's really close to my lot line. So I'm wondering what the setbacks are. Can it be set back farther? So I'm actually pretty blown away about this new plan, and very upset. So that's my gripes.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Pandora Snetkarb? Snetkin, thank you. Snetkin. I'm focused on the Pandora. That's a pretty cool name.
I say thank you, Mom, for that, basically. So I have a few comments. I'm the owner of 1224 Diana Road. This is going to be my retirement home. And I've been away from Santa Barbara for 30 years and am currently transitioning back. And I've only been camping in that house for a couple of months now. In my past life in Santa Barbara, I did historic preservation, archaeology, and environmental planning, including subdivisions. When I looked at the project and the project materials and went through them, there were basically 4 issues I want to address quickly. First one, it's privacy. I'm 50 feet off of the project site, but I tell you, when the people are out in the backyard of that adobe that we're talking about being a major area, and also parcel 2, those folks might as well be in my bedroom with me. It is noisy, it is loud, and they are looking right in to my backyard and bedroom. So in terms of privacy, we've got visual, we've got noise, you've got vehicle headlights. I'm going to talk briefly about the retaining walls issues, but for instance, on the south side on La Aquila Road, those cars, their lights are going to be shining above the houses below that are on the retaining wall. So what you're going to do is when the vehicles are moving around that lot, they're actually going to be going over a lot of the existing structures or into the bedroom windows. Because basically, what is not really effectively shown on the maps is that's like a little Hearst castle. It is perched up on the edge, and there's retaining walls on properties all around, and all the properties pretty much are lower than the ones we're talking about. Next one's traffic, and we have the lights. There's concerns about parking, overflow parking on Diana Road. There's been suggestions that perhaps you could have a gate installed on that side that could be used for emergency egress, fire department, those kinds of things, especially if it's becomes a through corridor, putting a residential gate on it and permitting that now as a condition of approval. The final 2 issues are somewhat related to each other, and they have to do with the draining and the retaining walls. There are a lot of very big retaining walls all around the edge of this property. And from my skimming of the project materials, I don't see that they were actually adequately addressed. A lot of those retaining walls you're not going to see unless you're in people's backyards because they're being blocked by the houses. Or if you look really closely at the topographic map, you'll see actually how tall they are. You know, and I just was looking at them. So what I'm suggesting is you have draft conditions of approval, and on page 3 and page 5, we have stormwater and drainage and water quality on those. And what I'm suggesting is that as a condition of approval, you actually require additional study evaluation of the drainage. Because, for instance, my neighbor, he's sandbagging his house. All of us along that part of Diana Road, we have flooding issues in our houses. We all have sump pumps. We're all trying to get water that's coming down the hill, including the one behind the subdivision, into the street. And where you have changes in drainage, particularly that are important, it's in that development, the area in the northeast. What is it called? Oh, the development restriction area. It's that one. And where all the water runs into his house, it's where the retaining walls are. It's an issue. So additional study and evaluation, a monitoring program for 5 to 10 years, and I would actually ask them to put up a performance bond for future improvements or that may be needed for drainage there. Because if it's just a general statement like it is currently in the conditions of approval, it would be very difficult to enforce. And it's pretty short. I'm especially concerned also with the retaining walls, changes in subsurface drainage up there affecting existing retaining walls. So that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
That's the end of public comment. Second, I'll go back to staff to see if staff has any additional comments based on what they heard.
Thank you, Chair Jordan. Just to follow up, I think, on a couple questions regarding Lot 4, the house at this location backing up here. The setback is 5 feet. That's an interior setback. They are observing that 5-foot setback. I think regarding story poles, they might not have been able to view them, but as you recall from our site visit Tuesday morning, story poles for all 3 of the proposed homes were installed, showing the ridge heights of the second story mass for each of the proposed 3 homes.
Okay. Mr. Gorn, I can just give you a couple minutes because I know you're going to get a ton of questions from the rest of us.
I don't feel like there's a whole lot of critical stuff to respond to, but there's a few things that I think it would just help us avoid further questions if I could just address it. You know, in terms of this traffic and overflow parking, this project includes 2 guest spaces on every single lot in addition to the 2 spaces for the house that's proposed. So categorically, we have twice the parking that everybody in the neighborhood has per house. The light spillover thing, I'm struggling to understand that one because our driveway goes through the middle of the property and it's surrounded by landscaping and 2-story houses and a 1-story house, so I don't know how it's going to spill onto adjacent properties. Ms. Snethkamp's point about cars coming down the driveway, if you're on La Quila Road, you could see headlights potentially facing you there if nothing was done there, but there's going to be landscaping there which blocks those headlights, and they also go over houses, and lighting spillover, as you know, it's a problem when it goes into your house at the same level as your house, not when it goes over your roof. So we don't see that as a huge problem. And then just categorically on drainage, this project is going to dramatically improve drainage conditions for everybody around the project site. Right now, it's a completely unengineered project site, which has just been draining wherever it happens to go. And when people say, has this been considered in the city of Santa Barbara? I mean, I know everybody doesn't know what you have to go through, but believe me, it's been considered. We had, I think, 5 separate DART resubmittals, and I think if you were to look at those, I don't think you would have much doubt left about whether Public Works carefully considered the drainage and the retaining walls and everything else that people brought up. Most people that don't do this for a living wouldn't know that, but you know, by the time a project gets in front of Planning Commission, all of this stuff's been considered like at Pentagon level detail. So I'm confident your commission understands that, but if you have specific questions, I can answer them later. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the commission. Mr. Campanella.
Yeah, question for Mr. Goring. Thank you. In addition to picking up drainage around the houses to the street, the open space, if I'm looking at this, the open space next to Lot 3, the existing Adobe.
Oh, I have an exhibit of our actual civil plans here, which I think
okay, that's
we
good.
can pull that up, and that might be helpful. I have a lot of slides, though. Okay. Great. That's our civil plan.
Okay. So are you, is part of your plan to pick up drainage off that open space where, let's say right now it might be draining off into neighboring property, but are you picking up some of that drainage to take it down to where you run your storm drains in the street?
Chair Jordan, Commissioner Campanella, no, we're not picking up drainage from here to take it elsewhere. Our plan is to leave this area in its current state undeveloped and restrict development there. What we are doing is we're picking up all of this drainage from the whole rest of the site that goes there and having it not go there anymore. So the amount of drainage that's going down off of our property through that point is going to be substantially diminished. And also, I'm sure you're familiar with this already, but our public may not be. The city of Santa Barbara requires downhill properties to accept drainage from uphill properties. That's historic drainage. So we're reducing the historic drainage that goes on those properties. And all of these properties here currently drain onto our property and across our property and into our neighbor's property. And this swale here, or it's a V-ditch, picks up all of this drainage here and directs it down into other drains, which takes it down to Diana Road. So all of this drainage here, that's not just from our property, but all of up here that currently flows across our property and affects neighbors' properties, we're picking all of that up. But we are leaving this little corner here in a natural state, and that corner itself doesn't generate that much drainage on its own.
Okay, so that the topography looks like in that upper corner that is going towards the neighbor's property as opposed to the areas that you're picking up just south of that.
Correct. Well, everything that's in here, this all sort of flows down through here. This little corner drops off significantly, and it does flow towards the neighbor's property. So our project will not increase drainage in that area to the neighbor.
Okay. Let's see, as far as the site plan, can we see where the houses were plotted again, maybe with your landscape plan?
Go to a color site.
Yeah, colored site plan if you have it.
I got one that doesn't have extra lines on it. There.
Okay. On the lot 4, which is on the left as you enter the property.
This one right here.
Okay. And then you have lot 1 across the street. To provide some separation, was it looked at perhaps that lot 1 on the right side, could that maybe be flipped so that the living area is on the other side of where the garage is, and perhaps lot 4 be pushed forward? The house on lot 4.
So you're talking about flip this house?
Lot number 1.
This is lot 1,
Okay,
right, John?
so let's say the living area flipped to the north of the garage versus right now it's on the south of the garage. I know you don't want to have two houses. If the idea is, could have you looked at Lot 4 coming closer to the street, but to get away from the neighbor's house. But I understand you don't want a pinch point with two houses next to each other to the street.
Sure, Jordan. Commissioner Campanella, the reason why we're not doing that is there's grade here as this begins to go up, and you'd have to do a lot more grading, and you wouldn't have a driveway approach angle that would work if the driveway was on this side here. The other thing is, at this location, this is the place where there's nothing on the adjacent property next to us. So we like this arrangement here because, and we don't want to crowd up against here and push things further towards La Quila Lane because this is up the slope from it, and the further you push towards it, then it does potentially create this domination effect. Also, I thought there was one comment about, how these would dominate and look into yards. I mean, this is, y'all were on the site here and you can see it here in this survey, but this entire property line here is completely covered with mature vegetation that intercept sight lines. So I don't think that that's as much of a concern as it might sound like.
Okay. Is on Lot 4, is the unit on Lot 4 where it's on the left side where it's near the property line on the left side, is that a two-story element all the way up, or is there any break?
No, this is one story at this level here, and it steps back here. This is the two-story portion. So the two-story portion is set back probably around 15 feet from the property line.
Okay, so looking down, there wouldn't be two stories looking down into the neighboring yard. It may only be one story, if that.
It's a one-story element that's adjacent to that 5-foot setback, and the two-story element doesn't start for another 10 more feet.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Lodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. These are more questions for you.
Okay.
We've received an email from Bob Gano, who lives at 1201 East Coda, which is the house, the east side of the driveway on Coda Street.
So that's this house right here?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, and actually you can see it on slide 11 of the cities, but I don't think you need to get that up, staff, that's okay. He said, I'm writing because I have concerns about a creek that whenever we have heavy rains. It comes in on the north side of my property from the Diana Road property, travels south across my backyard, and then turns and goes back onto their property. Is that swale going to take care of that? Okay, so all right. So
I'll answer it for the record. Chair Jordan, Commissioner Lodge, yes, this swale here would intercept that creek in two places. So either it would get it before it goes on his property, and when it's coming back around, it would get it again, and it channels it down to our drainage.
Is that what those lines indicate,
Yeah.
those diagonal lines indicate? Okay. And then you're taking it off the property and onto Diana Road. How is that done?
I don't want to go all the way back to the civil thing. I can explain it here, though. I mean, this swale and everything all flows into a drain, which is under our driveway here, and goes down and then exits onto Diana Road, and then it enters the city storm drain system. Okay. So, and the way it's designed is so the whole first thing, we have to comply with Tier 3 stormwater requirements. So the whole first, hours of rain gets funneled into an underground detention basin that perks it back into the site. And then when that fills up, it fills into a second underground basin that just stores it. And then if that fills up, then it begins to spill down this drain that goes through our driveway out to the city storm system. And then if that clogs, it overflows and spills along our driveway down into the city storm system. So we need rain, but I don't want to see the rain event that would do that.
Okay. All right. And then Mr. Gano, if that's how his name is pronounced, is concerned he has health issues, asthma, and so on. What are the plans for constructing this? I know the conditions require that as earth is being moved around to be kept damp, and so the dust is reduced. But are you going to be building this all at once? Obviously, you'd have to do the grading all at once and all the storm drain facilities at once. And then after that, will it be extended over a period of time? Or?
Chair Jordan, Commissioner Lodge, the intention is to build this all out at once. It's a small site. It's difficult to stage. You want to do it all at one time. That's how you minimize construction impacts to neighbors, is to just get it all done instead of doing them one at a time and extending it out over years. And you cited the APCD or air quality dust mitigation requirements, but they also have requirements that we're subject to in terms of low NOx generating equipment. We can't have trucks that are spilling pollutants into the air. They all have to comply with standards.
Okay. Okay, and then I did have some other questions. Oh, on the site visit, you said something about trying to the paving in the part that exists from Coda alongside the condos is somewhat decorative. And I thought I heard you say that you were going to have some kind of distinguishing surface between it and the paving for the project. And that I thought you said the project paving would be asphalt. Did I mishear you or misunderstand you?
Chair Jordan, Commissioner Lodge, you didn't mishear us. Most of our driveway is asphalt. However, over on the side where the condos are, where we're sharing their driveway with them, we're going to transition from a decorative paving into our asphalt so that there isn't like a hard line of asphalt as soon as you get to our driveway.
Okay, well, the Historic Structures site report said that it would be permeable paving on the project site.
Chair Jordan,
is that something
Commissioner Lodge, there is other areas of permeable paving on the project site, but the driveway is proposed to be asphalt, and our stormwater plan accounts for that.
Okay. Okay, and let me see if there was something else. Okay, and I was a little puzzled about the property owner whose house just meets at the corner there and next to the area where no development will be allowed ever. And he obviously has issues with storm runoff from that section, which is, from the site visit, it does drop rather steeply. Will what you're doing to collect drainage from Coda properties as well as the properties here, will that help alleviate his situation there? Is any of that going currently into the area that slopes down toward his house?
Chair Jordan, Commissioner Lodge, yes, this should reduce the amount of runoff that goes through that area over to his property. Okay. And there was one other thing he asked about on trees.
Oh,
and
yes.
No trees in that area are being removed. If one was marked, they were all marked by the arborist who had to give them all numbers. So he may have seen a tag around it or something, but just a tag doesn't mean it's being removed. It's just identified in a survey. The ones which were going to be removed, the only trees, the oak trees being removed are the ones I showed you on that exhibit, and then there was a couple of other trees in the middle of the site, and I think there's an ornamental tree down by the Coda Street driveway that's being removed. But no trees in that area next to his house are being taken out.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Higgins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you have a pointer?
No, not one that works, as well as Mr. Garnes.
Okay. So I'll try to describe what I'm talking about unless somebody can throw something at me. Thank you. We'll see how long it takes for Commissioner Jordan to tell me it doesn't show up on the TV screen. Like
I'm saying nothing.
Okay. So the point the neighbors are making is that this is starting out at a taller elevation or finished floor elevation in relation to this roof, but I don't think we know what the elevation grade is from the plans. Maybe you could inform us if you know. But can you make a case that, so there's three windows on this side that are on the second level, and then you have this balcony here. And so my question is, sometimes we get these projects that have, privacy issues, and sometimes the architect or applicant will volunteer to fix, wooden louvers on the windows at a 45-degree angle that lets light in, that doesn't show or doesn't or precludes any privacy issues out the window down below. Do you know what I'm referring to?
Chair Jordan, Commissioner Higgins, I've heard of that before. I came into this project in a planning capacity at the end, so I don't know the floor plan of this house. I can look at it. We have it.
We can put it up if you have it. We can put it up. But
I don't have it in my slideshow.
Okay.
But yes, I'm familiar with what you're talking about.
So when I look at that, and when those are considered, this horizontal distance is much closer, actually, in the cases that we've seen, like on Shoreline. But I want to say that because of this roof line and the total elevation change, the direction people are going to be able to look out is too tall to see down here, possibly. But I don't know that for sure because I can't tell. And you also have, it's
Okay, so
in other words, if you're looking out this way, and the entirety of this dais is out 12 feet, like this first floor roof element will be, I'm not going to be able to see underneath it effectively.
Chair Jordan, Commissioner Higgins, what you're talking about is does the lower roof plane intersect the line of sight from those windows down to the neighboring property? And yes, I believe it does. Also, those windows aren't low sill windows in an active area of the house that people would be standing and looking out of. One of the windows is in a stair tower, so it's just clear story in a stairwell. And then the other two are high windows in a bedroom. So the purpose of those windows is really to let light and air into a bedroom, not for somebody to stand on their tiptoes trying to see past their roof and through all those trees into the neighbor's backyard. And you are correct. Usually when the single-family design board has required something like that, it's when somebody's a lot closer on the adjacent property and there's a real privacy issue. Here, I think we've got, between that second story and the house next door, probably 45 feet or 40 feet.
Yeah, I don't like to play architect up here. And so did that issue come up at all in any of the design review hearings? It did, okay.
Yeah, it came up at all of the design review hearings, and this is the specific purview of single-family design board to take into account and our good neighbor guidelines, and they determined that this was all compliant.
So, and just to be clear, I don't see that there's an issue here because there's not much functionality coming out in this direction or any windows or doors. The house has already been there. It's really this side that appears to be, the potential to have the most privacy impact. Right? Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd say that's accurate.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Schwartz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Gorin, let's see. In general, you heard the public comment today. The list of concerns by the various neighbors. In all candor, is there anything remaining on the list of concerns that either you haven't addressed by my colleagues or otherwise? I can go through, I've taken notes from the members of the public. I think we've now discussed some of them. Anything else remaining that even from a good neighbor policy might warrant mentioning, and any further study, in your opinion, just so that we can all get along and in the end feel okay about the new development? And I'll go on beyond that after, get your thoughts.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Schwartz, I think we've handled everything perfect. No, I'm kidding. Those are all legitimate concerns, and I really do feel that through the exhaustive review process this has been through before it got here, including 2 different design review boards, these concerns have all been voiced and they've all been addressed. The one thing that I heard was from Ms. Snethkamp is the headlight spillover when you're coming down this driveway. I don't think it's a huge issue, but I think that's something I would encourage my client to just study further, not revising the project or changing the driveway, but looking at what sort of sort of a light barrier we can put down at the end of that driveway so that it would, it would reduce that further or any potential for that. And that could be something as simple as a 42-inch high dog ear fence. But, we're very constrained down there in terms of space. This has got to be a fire department turnaround here, but, we have a little space here, and if we could get, a short fence in there. The neighbors here have a lot of, they've also got, and it doesn't show on here, but they've got a lot of screening vegetation, but I don't know if right exactly at this spot there is some. So if I were on your commission, I would encourage us to study that further when we go back through project design approval.
Well, that's exactly where I was going to go. So you helped me underscore a direction in which I was going to ask you to further discuss this, and also as it goes back to design review, whether that's through a physical material or barrier or through additional landscaping that could easily be maintained and is fairly drought tolerant, even though the council has now gone from stage 3 back to stage 1, which still I think we all need to be very mindful even with that change. Let me go back then to a few other questions I have of you. This discussion of retaining walls, and I also have a question for staff about this. Talk to me a little bit about retaining walls in and around this property and what may or may not be proposed with the new development. And I ask because we have so many issues with especially older retaining walls in the city and then in these steeped elevation areas. So what could you tell me about that?
Okay, well, Chair Jordan, Commissioner Schwartz, I wish I had an exhibit or a way to just sketch this for you, because clients ask me the same thing all the time. When you've got an existing retaining wall in place and you're going to build a new structure next to it, you design that structure so that it doesn't, we call it surcharge the wall. Okay, so the structure delivers loads down into the ground, and then those loads go away from the structure at like 45 degrees from where the loads are entering the ground. And so what you generally do is you look at where the existing retaining wall is, and then you look at where the base of your structure is, and you start drawing that line, and you want to make sure that that line doesn't intersect that retaining wall at any point.
Yes.
If it does intersect the retaining wall, then what you do is you extend the footings of the house deeper. So now it pushes the top of the line down. So now when you draw the line, it goes under the retaining wall. And that guarantees that the structures that you're building new don't surcharge an existing retaining wall. So if the wall's there, it's in its current condition, it's going to stay in its current condition and not be exacerbated by loading from a new structure up on top of it. And we have to engineer all this stuff. We have to engineer our grading. We can't do grading that's going to undermine improvements on an uphill property or affect things on adjacent properties. And that would be a huge liability for us. So we're very conscious of it.
So thank you very much for that. So along those lines, has there been surveyed, and perhaps it's on one of the sheets we have, from both a design and engineering perspective, all of the retaining walls that might touch the said property that need to be considered in design and engineering so that this, as you call it, the surcharge doesn't occur?
Chair Jordan, Commissioner Schwartz, it's not in my presentation, but yeah, there are surveys of existing conditions on the property and around the property, and I believe those show the walls.
Including all the identification of walls on all the neighboring, immediately.
They show the tree trunks of trees. They show everything.
Okay, very good. Let's see here. Let me just... You touched on 2 guest parking spaces per parcel, right? Is that what we have, commitment?
That's correct.
So that would be 2 times 4. We have 8 guests, right? Because we have the 4. Yeah, that's what we have. Okay. And then let me go to our packet here. Excuse me 1 minute. So on pages 3 and 5, and one member of the public spoke to the stormwater pollution control and drainage system maintenance and also drainage and water quality, and you answered some of those questions. One request, well, 2 requests. One was an additional drainage study. I don't know if that's warranted. I know about Tier 3 standards, and they're really significant. We're familiar with those. Do you see anything additionally warranted, given anything new that you've uncovered with water flow patterns, flooding, anything else?
Sure, Jordan.
No?
Commissioner Schwartz, this is just a standard 4-lot residential subdivision, and the city's Tier 3 requirements are far beyond the level that's probably necessary to deal with a project like this, and we comply with those.
Including a monitoring program also was mentioned.
They don't require. Yeah, it's just rain runoff, and we're not doing any hazardous materials or anything on here. It's roof runoff and rain runoff, and Tier 3 requirements, they require pre-treatment. So any water quality issues are addressed by the pre-treatment requirements of Tier 3.
Okay. Thank you. I have one thank you very much. That's it. I have a question for staff. Maybe it's just to remind myself. Well, okay, let me do this. On page 3 of the conditions of approval, I know we've seen this on other conditions. On page 3, it's under number 7B, garage is available for parking. Now, I was trying to recall what it actually means when it requires in the covenant that to be signed, including a requirement that all the garages be kept open. Be kept open and available for parking of vehicles owned by. We've discussed this at Planning Commission before, but I'm not clear, and it's just jogged my memory. What actually is required via the covenant to be open?
Sure, Jordan. Commissioner Schwartz. I'm not sure if that's directed to me or staff.
I was going to ask staff.
I can answer it as a developer of lots of projects.
Okay,
I mean, essentially what we have to do to satisfy staff is so a project like this has shared drive. It's got a lot of shared driveways. So it's going to have a road maintenance agreement as part of the project. And generally in projects like this, the road maintenance agreement is also the vehicle by which you impose covenants, conditions, and restrictions on the entire property as to use, et cetera. And this would be in those CC&Rs, and staff reviews those CC&Rs as part of the map recordation process at the ministerial phase of the project. So they check to make sure we've got a requirement that's going to go on title to all these properties that says you have to park in your garage. And on the subject of no parking, I also want to say, like, this condition that we heard today, this is the first time we heard it, but it's fine. We agree with red striping the fire department turnaround to be no parking.
Okay, so that's going to be in the CC&Rs that all automobiles owned by the tenant's owners, not visitors, need to be parked in the garages. So there won't be cars parked in front of the garages as a substitute for parking in the garages. Is that what that's all about?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Schwartz, the condition is parking needs to be available in the garages. Okay, so
I see.
The garage has to be open so that they could pull a car in there. It can't be like most people's garage.
Okay. And then I think my last one's for staff. Thank you. And so on page 4 of our conditions of approval, and this is item 7C, regarding landscape maintenance, I've been thinking since the Thomas Fire and the debris flow in the last couple of years, what's happened in Montecito is in some areas it has radically changed the landscape. And so when I read this kind of requirement, a covenant that provides that the landscaping shown on the approved landscaping plan, let's say right now this year, shall be maintained and preserved at all times. It's like regardless of circumstances, regardless of natural, in accordance with the plan. Such plan shall not be modified unless prior written approval is obtained from the appropriate design review board. So my question to staff is, how quickly, how flexibly are we with our process if let's say it's a disaster that occurs, takes out the landscaping from the approved plan, and the property owner hamstrung in terms of replacing, improving the property vis-a-vis landscaping until they can go through the city process and get a new plan approved? Or do we offer more flexibility than that under certain circumstances? Maybe it's extraordinary circumstances like a natural disaster as an example. And again, because if I could just wrap this up and then I'll ask you to comment, there are many Montecito property owners who still do not have, a year later, more than a year later, permits from the county to make improvements to their properties. And so I think we need to be more mindful about how we craft these conditions of approval in light of what we've now experienced, just in the last 2 years there. So what could you tell me, Ms. DeBusk or Ms. Bedard, what your thoughts are about that?
Chair Jordan and Commissioner Schwartz, there wouldn't be any limit in terms of if they wanted to replace the landscaping that was there, they can do that. They do not need to come to us. It's only if they wanted to change it. Now, in the event of emergencies, fires, we do work with property owners in terms of appropriate next steps. Oftentimes,
on an urgent basis?
Correct.
Is that prioritized, escalated, that kind of thing?
It has been for the last...
I wouldn't want them to be held up. You see where I'm going. I wouldn't want them to be held up because they have to go through some typical process when there's an extraordinary circumstance due to, something out of, let's say, out of the property owner's control.
Correct. And in the past, we have worked with property owners in those cases.
Okay, I think those are my questions for now. Thank you.
You're welcome. I just have a couple. And then I think Mr. Campanella has some more. Mr. Gordon, it's a question around the cut and the fill. So you're cutting 1,000, filling 500, give or take. Does the 500 fill, is that part of the 1,000 that's cut, just stays on the property, or are you really taking 1,000 away?
Mr. Chair, that's balance.
Okay.
You have to account for both sides of it.
So instead of 70 trucks, give or take, you're going to just have 30-some trucks that haul out of there in a week of discomfort for everybody, right? Okay. All right, thanks. And a couple questions for staff, and the easy one is just a softball, but, and because we've asked this question before too on engineering for structural soils, how that affects property owners, what happens with the stormwater. I'm pretty sure I'm just going to ask for your affirmation, but there's nothing in here really yet. There's going to be pages and pages and pages of engineering that's developed after they actually go through the plan check and permit process that will address many of the concerns you heard today about how water is going to flow, how it's going to be retained, how the houses are going to load the soil around that. That's all still to come, correct?
Yes, thank you, Chair Jordan. And Commissioners, that process, as far as the stormwater management, like the Tier 3 requirements, that's required to be addressed prior to final design review approval. So that would be part of this final approval by the Single Family Design Board. And then the rest of the civil and whatnot would be during the plan check. Thank you.
And then my only other, or I guess my only sticking point is the finding in the middle of the public street waiver, finding 2, that there is adequate provision for maintenance of the proposed private driveway through a recorded agreement. So that's a finding I need to make to approve the street waiver, but every reference I see to that anywhere else in the staff report is that's something that happened, the details of that happened much later. And there's nothing to put in front of me now that even begins to address what adequate is for a provision of a maintenance agreement for that private driveway. It's kind of like the horse is on the wrong side of the cart. Does that make sense? So you're asking me to make a finding that there is an acknowledged that I'm seeing a adequate provision for this maintenance plan of the private driveway, but there's nothing that's been shown here today tangible that there is. But I'm supposed to make a finding for that.
Chair Jordan, that is correct. You are not looking at a draft agreement in order to help you make that finding. It's based on deferring that to the city attorney and to planning staff to review the form and content of that document to make sure it's adequate. So that's something our Public Works Department, Fire Department, and Community Development Departments would all be looking at. There have been other cases where the commission has asked to see a draft document in advance of making the finding when they had, significant concerns. But I believe that since that time, then they felt comfortable with the form of that document, and since that time, it hasn't been requested to be reviewed by the Planning Commission. But you certainly could do that if you had issues.
So the way the process works now, it's a hope and faith kind of thing, right? My finding is a hope and faith transfer rather than a real finding that there is exactly what it says right there. There is, there is adequate provision. I mean, all sorts of mischief can be raised there, right? Okay, I'll dwell on that one. Commissioner
Sure,
Campanella. Oh.
In the conditions of approval, we can take care of that it would be that the adequate, and I think it actually might be in there already, that there's adequate street maintenance and that it's addressed through an agreement approved to form by the city attorney.
You're just repeating the finding, all you're doing there.
Right, but it's, so we can address it, you'll just.
So you're saying my finding of adequate is a condition that there is adequate, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of messy language, so, yep.
It does say it will be provided.
No, I know it will be. That's all that's all that's in every document here. But I'm being asked to make a finding today that I see adequate provision of a plan, and not that I see that one's going to be done in the future. So it's just probably the way we've always done it. I would characterize it as kind of out of order and sloppy, but that's just me. Commissioner Campanella.
Thank you. In looking at the Single Family Design Board minutes of May 29th, 2018, which I think is the latest ones in our package, there was an item 5, and I don't know if it's been addressed specifically on how it is requested by the Design Board of the Planning Commission. This is on page 85 of 95 of our package, if you want to look at it. Item 5 on the motion to continue to the Planning Commission. This would be PC Agenda Package 85 of 95. It states the board requests the Planning Commission and applicant discuss the Diana Road exit that requires particular traffic scrutiny and requests the applicant to de-emphasize the use of that portion of the road. So since there is no request similar to that except for number 5, and there's no request of historic landmarks for us to do some type of review. So I think I'd like to discuss that, and just to satisfy the Single Family Design Board that we did, and staff then could report back. Thank you.
Because, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Campanella, that's being addressed through minimizing the width of that driveway and making it appear as much as possible as a residential driveway from Diana Road. We don't want somebody to mistake this as a road. That's actually one of the compelling reasons for your support of a street frontage waiver here and not having to do a public street, is we don't want people to look at this as a thoroughfare to cut through between these two streets. And I think the way that it's been designed and the way that you see it when you're out there, it really just does look like a driveway. It's not something I would decide to turn up and go down if I was unfamiliar with the area or driving along there.
Okay, it said de-emphasize. We're not talking about gates or anything like that. Would you feel, was that mentioned to the board at the time that they continued it to us, or would this be something you'd have to explain now due to your final design?
It was a concern, but they've talked about it in terms of keeping it minimized, maybe putting speed bumps in. I mean, nobody wants this to become a thoroughfare, so we're not putting some huge entry thing that says, Diana Road Estates, nothing like that. It's just the driveway is just down there, sort of nondescript, and really the only people that should be using it are people that know about it, and that would be the people that live there and their guests.
Okay, particular traffic scrutiny. I don't know what that means.
Maybe Chelsea can answer that.
Yeah. Just trying to satisfy the request.
Chair Jordan and Commissioner Campanella, if you want me to speak to the concern of the amount of trips that we would anticipate here, or what would you like?
Well, I don't know which one it would be, but to we're discussing traffic scrutiny and de-emphasizing the portion of the road there.
Yeah, I think
so I think I'm a little bit, I'm satisfied with de-emphasizing. If that would be satisfactory to the design board as well, single-family design board, but I don't know what traffic scrutiny is. So
I'm not sure what they meant by that comment. I think the concern was from the neighbors and creating a cut through here that was inviting for the neighbors. And as I mentioned earlier, it doesn't make sense to be a cut through, and I don't think it would be based on just the circulation available in the area. I agree that the driveway entrance from Diana Road is narrow. It doesn't appear to be a street. It won't appear to be a street. There could be signage installed in the future if it were a concern of the neighbors about it being a private driveway. That is one solution in that event. But we don't anticipate this looking like an inviting road, like a typical road where people would want to drive through. And
so you will get back, someone will tell this, or our staff representative will be conveying this to the design board, so we know we spoke about it, and this is what we heard.
Sure, I can do that. Yeah.
Okay, because I don't think we're at. I don't think it's a condition. I don't know how to phrase a condition. There's nothing in here to that effect. So I think I'd recommend just letting it go with an explanation back to design board by both the applicant and staff that I think would hopefully satisfy them.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Higgins.
Thank you. Maybe for the record, you can tell us whether or not the city would support making that a one-way or gating it, or why we don't like those things, or why the Public Works Department doesn't like those things, so we can report on all possible ideas back, or staff can when it goes back to the Design Review Board.
Okay. Chair Jordan and Commissioner Higgins, as far as a one-way, so we would need to take into consideration, and you're talking specifically about the Diana Road portion?
Yes.
It's a possibility. I think it's sort of an auxiliary point of access at this time. The fire access, the emergency access comes from Coda Street. It's the widest portion, so the Diana Road is driveway is an alternative. As far as gating it, it's something we could entertain. We would normally require driveway gates to be 20 feet back. I don't know if it would work with the slope of the driveway and how it would open. I'm not certain about that. There is a condition of approval that we recommended to have a pedestrian access easement through the driveway. So if you have a gate, you'd want to accommodate that. If there's further things you'd like our division to look at as far as how to address this concern, usually it's not until there is we don't foresee a problem here as far as cut-through traffic, and then the addition of 3 single-family homes is very minimal as far as trips go. So we didn't recommend any sort of changes to prevent cut-through, but there are ways to deal with that, primarily with signage, I think.
Ms. Sludge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It seems to me that this is a question that could and should be left to see what happens. If it turns out to be a problem, then they can put up more signs or consider a gate or whatever, but I'm willing to go along with transportation's evaluation of the likelihood of that happening.
Ms. Bedard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To follow up on Commissioner Campanella's question regarding the motion from the Single Family Design Board on May 29th, I think the primary concern was really that they were not the land use decision, so they wanted to bring the attention to you as the planning commissioners, as the land use discretionary review body. It was just because it was brought up as comments during the design review process. So really to stress to the concerned neighbors that it's not their purview and it's the Planning Commission purview.
Mr. Campanella, you have more?
I have an observation if we're done with comments.
Yep. No,
Okay.
we're into comments.
I'm sorry, before comments, After questions, but before comments. I don't want to break up the flow and the comments
I
and the
think we've
motion.
started on comments.
Yep. Okay, before pre-comments, I have an observation, if I can. Pre-comments on this project. If we, on page 14 of 95 in our package, page 6 of the staff report, and Ms. Ostrander, I'm going to be sensitive to our mission today, but I do want to make an observation. The inclusionary housing ordinance pertaining to for sale projects versus the upcoming review by Ordinance Committee of proposals for inclusionary on AUD rentals just are calculated differently. They're different programs. They're just different ways to subsidize what the intent is or what you're trying to produce. But I just wanted to point out, and I pointed this out to staff, the fees for this particular project for 2,000 square foot units are $21,757. Proposal that's going to the Ordinance Committee is that AUD rental units, which average around 850 square feet, be charged $20 to $25 a foot, which is approximately the same as these 2,000 square foot houses are paying in lieu fees. Different methodology, but I think we have to look at the result and the impact on whatever we're building. And perhaps I can spend a little more time with staff to get a better understanding, because we never really lined up the two programs, the actual today on for sale and the proposed on rental. But I wanted to point that out, that they were essentially the same, single-family detached versus a attached 850 square foot unit. Thank you.
Okay. Additional comments? Deliberation? Motion? Mr. Higgins.
Just in the comment category, and based on your question or concern about cart before the horse on the condition and the agreement, it's probably done this way for a good reason. I imagine that because after final engineering goes through the process or back to the Single Family Design Review Board, there's potential for changes to the design that would effectively change maybe either the maintenance obligations or the cost of those maintenance obligations, and so that's probably the reason why we don't see that agreement here. But it does say, the conditions do say that there will be an effective instrument, or I'll get the conditions in a second, but it does tie, the finding ties to the condition of approval. And we typically trust staff to then effectuate those conditions of approval with agreements. To backload or front load all those agreements up ahead of time would just cause a ripple effect later, wherein something would have to be amended after final engineering and it becomes to be a mess and we never produce any housing in this community. Oh, that's right, we don't.
Wow.
All that would happen in the 10-day appeal period. Ms. Schwartz.
Wow, okay. Let's see, a few, in no particular order. Thank you, Commissioner Higgins. Put a smile on my face this afternoon. First, I want to talk about proposed design, and this is, I'm just looking at sheet A202 in our packet. Not only is, I think, these designs very tastefully done, so I want to commend the designer, but I think that given some recent concerns in the community about design and neighborhood compatibility, I think these designs really fit well and are spot on in neighborhood compatibility. And I know this neighborhood well. So my compliments there, and I'm very supportive of that. I want to touch on some of the issue areas that the public brought forward today. Again, in no particular order. First, drainage and flooding. This, like many other areas of our city, especially where we have varying slopes, certain types of topography, even soils that don't lend themselves well to stormwater absorption, runoff from property, cascading down from property to property, actually in every direction, with flooding and all kinds of then structural issues that occur from that flooding. There was a mention of a French drain, which I know are quite expensive. I have experience with a French drain on family property. I have confidence in at this point, so I want to let you know from all the materials I've read and knowing the applicant team and Stormwater 3 requirements, which are significant and very expensive. It's quite an expensive investment that property owners are required to invest in if, in fact, they have to comply with Category 3. I'm confident at this point that the right system and engineering is going to be installed at great expense to this property owner with this redevelopment, that they're going to significantly improve stormwater runoff, drainage, flooding, et cetera, not only for this property, but all the neighboring, the neighboring historically affected properties. So I'm hoping that's the case. The neighbors and neighborhood will certainly contact the city if after all of this is implemented, if it doesn't adequately address these issues. We've seen this, we've approved these types of projects in other areas of the city where there are steep slopes, where there are current drainage and flooding problems, and there have been significant improvements. So I know that's asking you to kind of trust us with our track record and the type of decision making and the types of investments we require of property owners. So since a number of you are still here in the chambers today, I want you to know that please stay involved. I'm sure you will, as interested and concerned neighbors, but right now I have confidence in the requirements and that are before us, and that and the investment that the property owner will be required to make. And I'm sure our staff will hear from you in due time if you're pleased or have continuing concerns. Now, in terms of the two stories proposed and whether or not that will affect privacy, whether it's just light shining down, light pollution, night light pollution, noise. We're in a very dense urban setting. What I'm about to say, I've said before when new development, infill new development is taking place in our urban setting. And this is, whether you consider it suburban or urban, nonetheless, we're living close into one another. And there is going to be some noise because it's populated by human beings as opposed to being up in the valley and where you have, very, very large acreage properties. So in one sense, I think we need to be mindful of the fact that we've chosen to live in a dense urban setting, and we will hear some noise from neighbors. Hopefully it's not excessive and it's considerate, but with only 3 new single-family homes being proposed on this property. One already exists, as you heard, that's the historic one. So only 3 new ones, and they're not even close, by the way, to coming in at a square footage or floor area ratio, as the term is used, to what they actually could develop, and I think you heard Mr. Gorin address that. So the modest square footage compared to what they have the right to develop is respect-worthy, in my opinion. I think that it's also compatible for the neighborhood in terms of the scale of the square footage. It feels bigger. This is what happens in Santa Barbara. So as these elevations occur, a small single-family home can, as appearance, loom large, even block mountain views. But it can be a very modest, one-story, single-family home, and that's because of the topography that we're dealing with. So I'd like us to kind of be more accommodating in our attitudes and our understanding of this, and to say some of it comes with living in an urban setting, some of it comes in living with these slopes and in different elevations of topography, whether we're up or we're down from a property that's changing. And I'm just then appealing to the neighbors to try to be somewhat understanding and accommodating in that regard. I do think there are opportunities which the Single Family Design Board will take up with the applicant, and that's to do everything possible regarding screening. And it's both the materials used with window treatments, et cetera, placement of windows. By the way, if I could pause and just remark for a moment, the Planning Commission on a number of mostly multifamily residential projects has asked and actually required some of those applicants to relocate, to slightly shift the window placements around so it's not window to window. Now that often, I have to tell you, is closer in to our very dense urban core, where the lots are smaller, the structures are closer together, and actually you could look right out the window, you know, a bathroom to a bathroom or a bedroom to a bathroom, something like that. And so we have requested in those cases that there be more good neighbor policy applied in that regard. I don't know that that's going to be an issue here. However, while we have the applicant team here before us today, I would just ask that you take a fresh look with the Single Family Design Board to do everything possible, both in terms of windows and balconies, and then also appropriate landscaping for privacy screening where we can, knowing that landscaping alone does not create all the privacy we might like. And landscaping changes over time. You heard my questions earlier, and that's, of course, from natural disaster, but also landscaping dies. Landscaping doesn't get maintained. I mean, we know this throughout the city. Okay, on to a couple of other comments. Setbacks. I've studied the setbacks for this proposed project. They do comply, as you heard from our staff, with the city required setbacks. And at this point, I believe the applicant team has been sensitive, not only compliant, but sensitive to how close a neighboring structure is, another single-family home, to the new proposed 3 homes, again, 3 of the 4, the 4th being the existing historic adobe. I want to just then touch on one last topic that I think came up during public comment. And it touches on noise in a way. And since I was on the site on Tuesday, along with some of my colleagues, let me just confirm for you, I think I can say this without a doubt. There are many more people on the property right now than you're going to have. I know this is conjecture on my part in a way. It's like now and a look ahead. I think there are many more people on the property today, living in all kinds of manners on the property today, than you will find once these brand new beautiful 3 additional homes with a restoration and a retention of a historic adobe, single family homes with CC&Rs, very strict covenants they will have to abide by. We'll find out. The city will hear if they're not abiding by it and their neighbor concerns. So to me, this is a significant improvement, will be a significant improvement for you. I don't know what you're experiencing today. I'm not going to ask. You don't have to divulge any further, so to speak. I think this will improve over time, certainly, the quality of life for the neighborhood. And I know I'm just asking you to take my look ahead, and some of you are skeptical that will happen. But again, you know what are the requirements for the project will be, and if you experience adverse effects, I know that probably both the new property owners and the city will hear, and we want you to come forward. Now, lastly, Mr. Chair, I just want to go to a couple of other things in our package, not from public comment. Mr. Campanella touched on, and I'm going to reference on page 6 of the staff report, this is page 14 of 95 in our packet. So with this project, this for sale project, under Municipal Code 30.160.030, we have an what's called an inclusionary housing ordinance, where a fee of $21,757 per unit is paid by the applicant. And what I just want to comment on this, so this comes out to $65,000, 271. That's 3 new units. It's for each new unit, for sale unit. So the existing Adobe doesn't have to pay this. So this is an additional $65,000+ into a bucket of money in the city from for sale inclusionary. Right now we have about $600,000 in that bucket. And I'm just going to say for the record, staff knows I will continue to engage them on how we can apply the monies that are sitting in these buckets, both for sale and potentially new rental, in a timely way to actually get more affordable housing built. This is a goal of mine before I time out on Planning Commission, and so I'm going to be bearing down on the details of how we structure or restructure inclusionary so that we can use these funds from extracted fees of applicants and new projects to actually get new housing built that we need, especially rental. So just 2 other things, Mr. Chair, that are in our conditions of approval. No, I'm sorry. I want to compliment something that Ms. Hernandez said, because I agree. And she had to leave, but I just want to say I agree with our city historian. I think that the design is a good example of how old and new can work together. This was her comment. We struggle a lot with this. Actually, every city does. That's an old city that is changing over time, new development, redevelopment. And that Ms. Hernandez believes that with the plan in place, it will retain all of the original Adobe portions, and to me that's very important. Lastly, going to our conditions of approval, I will be supporting a staff addition to our conditions. I wrote this down just to remind myself, and that's that no parking in the fire turnaround lane. I think Ms. Bedard gave us this language that she recommended be added, and I don't think there was any concern and so forth. Maybe you can mention, Ms. Bedard, where you think that would be appropriate to place that new condition, but I'm in support of that, and I didn't hear anything from the applicant team with any opposition to that. So those are all my comments. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Lodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion to make the findings on pages 12 and 13 of the Planning Commission staff report and grant the street front modifications, approve the tentative map, the public street waiver, and to adopt the conditions of approval, including one that was just added by Commissioner Schwartz that was discussed before. There will be a way of marking the turnaround area for the fire trucks as no parking. And I would like to add that I add a request to the applicant to study ways to screen headlights of cars coming down the center driveway. I agree with all the comments about that Commissioner Schwartz has made about the positive aspects of this project. I know, there will be impacts. It will change the neighborhood a bit. But on the other hand, I believe you will have better conditions as far as flooding waters are concerned, and a structure of merit will be restored back to the way it should be.
Second. And further discussion. Did you have more, Mr. Higgins?
I'd just like to add, I agree with, the eloquent words of Commissioner Schwartz in terms of the positive attributes in our inherent, changing urban landscape. And the gentleman that spoke earlier about just getting together with the neighborhood recently, I think might lend another opportunity for you all to perhaps meet with the applicant team in a more informal setting. Because there's a lot to know and a lot to learn, and I learn something every time I show up here every day. I learn something new in real estate, and so the amount of technical studies and analysis that goes into a project like this is not, I guess just looking at it on a set of plans doesn't do it service. because of the amount of heavy lifting that a lot of consultants and engineers and technicians have to do on both sides of the aisle, the applicant and the city and various departments. So it's a major undertaking. And overlapping regulations really makes it difficult to get to this point, especially a project that has to go to both ABR and HLC, just on a design standpoint. So I would hope that there could be some kind of a compromise with regard to the second level windows on lot 4 in the southeast corner there. I don't personally envy the homeowner there to the west. I'm kind of hoping there might be a solution there, or there's already an underlying solution with regard to the grade change that will render the views there sort of inoperable in terms of a privacy standpoint. But other than that, I support the project and the conditions of approval.
Mr. Campanella.
Thank you. I agree with all my colleagues on this project. I think the fact that both the Single Family Design Board and Historic Landmarks sent the projects to us with unanimous approval on comments on where the project was going. I think the neighbors and public can see that there's a lot of review that goes on before these type of projects get a building permit. A lot of various departments, both preliminarily and towards final execution of once they know specifically what the building plans look like and what's going to be executed. Also, I'm impressed by the comment of our urban historian on how the applicant responded to having a historical resource on site. And I think it allays fears that I think a lot of the community have that new development may infringe upon or distort or take away from the physicalness or the physical location of particular historical structures. And our city does a lot to make sure that does not happen. So I think the applicant has worked well to achieve this, and I'm going to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. So I too will be supportive. There's we all remarked when we walked up there the other day that we kind of walked out of the city and into another state of development. So I think it's going to be an improvement to the neighborhood. I think you guys are the neighbors are eventually going to find that it's a tangible benefit. Most of the issues that you've talked about concerning drainage, concerning construction will be solved through the process still yet to come. The lots are obviously similar to the other neighborhood lots. It's not luxury housing. I would call it modest housing on modest lots, meeting with the other ones in the same design. It's very overgrown, and I'm also happy that the replanting job will continue to make it very overgrown, and it's particularly with canopy trees. The height's well under the allowed height. The design part of it that went through Single Family Design Board was unanimously approved each time. So I'll too be supporting the motion, and despite my peers' proddings on the left and right to steer me towards other language, that's a repeat of that silly finding in the middle there speaks to the now and present. Said there is, where really it should say there will be. That would be a finding to make rather than there is. So the next time we do an NZO project, yeah. That says in the finding it says there is. So it's a here and present now. So which I think the finding I'm really making is that there will be at a future time. So.
Chair Jordan, just to clarify, if you look on page 13, I think you're referring to item number 3, and it says adequate provision for maintenance of the private driveway will be provided.
Correct. I'm actually looking at the finding on page 8.
Correct. That's the required finding, but then the finding you're actually making is
I'm
this
sorry.
one
It
number
does say
3.
will be
That's
then.
that's how you're
right.
making the finding.
Right. I'm focusing on the wrong part of it then. Okay. So with that, any other discussion? So motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Okay. this item can be appealed in the 10-day period, and I'm hopeful. I know you guys are, both sides sitting out there are in good hands. I have trust in the neighborhoods. Keep an eye on this, and I have trust in that development team over there too, so continue to work on this as it goes forward. So we'll move on to liaison and committee reports, and I'll just briefly start off with the staff hearing officer just had an item yesterday that was inconsequential and nothing to report on. So others? Commissioner Lodge, or I'm sorry, Commissioner Schwartz.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yesterday afternoon, I, along with Commissioner Jordan, attended the PATH Community Forum. That's the Neighborhood Partnership Forum. It used to be referred to as the Milpas Action Task Force. Most people still know it as that. And PATH, as the commission knows, decided to hold this meeting right there at their facilities on Cacique Street. It was overflow, basically standing room only, very well attended, with a diversity of attendees, not only from PATH and the city, but Cottage Health System. The United States Postal Service from across the street had representatives coming. There were business owners, residents, and Housing Authority, City of Santa Barbara. The County of Santa Barbara was represented as well. PATH management gave an overview for those in the room as to the shift in the model that's taken place in serving the homeless, supporting the homeless, transition, helping them, services, housing, employment, from the model that used to be in existence at Casa Esperanza before it was acquired by organization PATH. And in closing, I'll say that I think many in the room, as I was overhearing comments and conversation at the end, were hopeful that perhaps with yesterday's very robust attendance, there could be a reinvigoration of interest among neighboring residents and business owners to re-engage, because the attendance has been in decline, and that's been a concern. I hope to stay involved, even though I'm not an official member, and perhaps Commissioner Jordan and I together might be involved, since we both have mutual interests in this issue and in these members of our community. Lastly, I would say, and I think many members of the public may not know this, even some within the city, but the recent point-in-time count where we physically go out throughout the county and physically talk to the number of people who are homeless and on our streets, living in their vehicles, etc., was done. And at last Thursday's Planning Commission lunch meeting, I shared some of the new statistics that are now available through United Way Home for Good. It's the organization that hosts and organizes the point-in-time count. Most of the homeless in Santa Barbara County have been Santa Barbara County residents. Most of the homeless currently in Santa Barbara County are from here, not necessarily born here and raised here, but they are Santa Barbarans, and I think that's an important data point to share, because there's both misinformation and the lack of information about who our homeless are. It's not a homogeneous group of individuals, and in fact we have a rise in single women, in veterans, and even, yes, students at our higher education institutions who are homeless and living in all kinds of unhealthy and unsafe conditions. In fact, you probably have heard that Jeff Green, CEO of City College Foundation, is doing a new study of all the students at City College to determine the percentage of them who are homeless. And at last count, it was around 15,000, 15%, which was actually shocking. But I'm sure new data will be forthcoming as all of that research is completed. So with that, I just want to conclude by saying tomorrow, Commissioner Campanella and I, because we couldn't just end with today, we have to bring it home on a Friday to continue our work here at the city. He and I will be attending our second meeting of the working group, and Ms. Ostringer is helping to guide that work, the Residential Multifamily Objective Design Standards Working Group. And there'll be more about the work being done and the meetings that will be held in due time. But tomorrow we have our second meeting, and I'm very much looking forward to that myself, as I'm sure Commissioner Campanella is. So thank you.
Commissioner Campanella.
Thank you. Yeah, we're going to be meeting tomorrow. I just wanted to say one thing about the fact is liaison to ABR. I did, in the last week or so, did discuss with some ABR members that are not on the ad hoc committee about what we're trying to achieve on objective standards, and they were both non-participants I spoke to were very much in favor of what we're doing, and felt that it could clear things up. And at the last meeting this past Monday that Ms. Ostringer attended, they were looking forward to some training, let's say, which is coming up. I don't know if you want to just take a second and explain when that's taking place for the design boards.
We're having training for all design boards, SFDB, HLC, and the ABR in early January to discuss their roles and responsibilities and just give them some general training on their guidelines and procedures.
So this is all, moving in a positive direction to make things perhaps clearer and more predictable for applicants and the public and staff as we go through the process. So happy to be participating. Thank you.
Is that it? Can we safely announce then that next week's meeting is canceled? So that notice will go out tomorrow, I guess, and then that'll put us off until the first week of May, right? Okay, then we're adjourned. Thanks.
Under a blanket of blue,